Police Disability Retirement Plan. Let's start with approval of minutes from the November 14th meeting first, and then we'll move to the following minutes. Any comments about the November 14th minutes? Do I have a motion to approve those minutes as written?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right, those approving, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, same for the minutes of the December 19th meeting. Any questions or concerns about those minutes? All right, let's repeat that. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes as written?
Make a motion.
Okay.
Second.
All right, and those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so we've approved both of those sets of minutes from the prior two meetings. Do we have any visitors today? Julie, you're on mute. Do we have any visitors today in person or, okay, no visitors?
No, thank you.
Actually, Nick, are you there? There you go. Nick, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, can you all see and hear me?
Yes.
Oh, well, hello, everyone. Met some of you, and it's good to see some others. I'm Nick Coffey. I'm a policy advisor here in Commissioner Gonzalez's office and liaison to FPDR. So thank you for inviting me today. Excited to sit through my first meeting. So thank you all for inviting me.
Thank you for coming to sit with us. Anyone on the phones? Okay, then. Let's proceed to our action items. We have one, which is adopting the 24-25 budget. And I suspect that is a Stacy item. But perhaps Sam. Okay. All right.
No, you suspect correctly. I could give Sam the surprise of his life. Sam, will you walk everyone through the budget? You could do it. I know you could. Hey, everybody. I'm Stacy Jones, and I am the FPDR. Today, anyway, I'm in my capacity as the FPDR finance manager. And it's time for the board to talk about next fiscal year's budget. Julie, I don't seem to have the option. Oh, there it is. Oh, it says that you've disabled my participant screen sharing. You can share the presentation if you want. But you're on mute, Julie, if you're trying to talk to me.
I'll share my screen now. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so if you want, you can go ahead and share the presentation, and I'll just tell you when to advance the slides.
Okay.
That works for me.
That's the wrong screen. One moment.
But while Julie is pulling that up, I can just remind staff and let Trustee Kramer know for the first time, since this is his first time going through this, that this is the only bureau in the entire city that council does not have direct budget authority over. You, as the Board of Trustees, have the exclusive power and authority to adopt the FPDR budget. Council is simply directed to levy a tax to meet the requirements of the fund according to the budget that you all approve. So totally unique in that way within the city of Portland. We do, of course, participate in the city's budget process because our budget will be combined with all of the other funds in the city for the state required citywide budget. So we do go through the citywide budget process, but council doesn't have the authority to change our budget. That is all up to you folks. So at the same time that we do Julie's got it up. Okay. At the same time that we do, that I walk you through the budget for next fiscal year, let me get up I will also talk you through the 5-year forecast because we want to look ahead. I mean, the city requires us to do this since we have our own fund, but of course it's just good practice to also look ahead for the next 4 fiscal years and make sure that we're aware of anything that might be coming our way we don't want to just think year to year. So I'll also walk you through that. And our fiscal years, Trustee Kramer, run July 1st to June 30, like most local governments. So we're talking about the budget that will start on July 1st, 2024 and run through June 30, 2025. I do want to mention that the citywide budget process is very different this year, and I kind of mentioned that at the last meeting, and that is because of the citywide restructuring that's going to happen partway through the next fiscal year on January 1st, 2025. That's in response to charter changes that the voters approved last fall, 2 falls ago. So all of that restructuring and all the things that need to happen as part of that first year budget under the new form of government has delayed the budget process by just a couple of weeks. But that does mean that a few of the numbers in this budget aren't as final as usual. And we don't have official budget documents yet, like we normally do at this time of year when I'm sharing this stuff with you. The budget publishing software isn't even opened yet, for example. But our budget is finalized. You know, we have prepared it. There are some pieces that are still moving, but they're mostly small in nature. And I'll talk about those as we go through the budget. And they are only in places where we intersect with other bureaus because they're a couple of weeks behind us at this point because of the citywide process. And we have mocked up a document for you that looks kind of similar to what we've given you in the past. And so I think it's behind my presentation, although it might be in front of my presentation in your board books. You will see something that looks quite a bit like a portion of what we will turn in to the city budget office and to the elected officials for them to see our budget. So that has some narrative summary of our programs in the Bureau. That part will all be familiar to you, but also some tables with our budget and tables with our positions in it. So Julie, let's head to the next slide and just stop me if you have questions, folks, of course, as always. So on this first slide, this slide just gives you an overview of resources, money coming in, and requirements, money going out, in the budget that staff are recommending to the board for fiscal year 24-25. And then we're comparing it to the current year projection, not the budget, but the projection as of now, and to actual revenues and expenses in the prior year, which was fiscal year 22-23. And to the far right, you'll see the percentage change for next year's budget as compared with the current year projection. So you can see how things are moving year over year. I'll just hit some highlights now before we get into details. Property taxes are going to need to grow by nearly 15% over the current year. And I'll talk more about that as we get deeper into revenues. But for now, I'll just say that it's got a lot to do with the fact that we held property tax growth down so much over the last 2 years while we were spending down fund balance. You'll see that miscellaneous revenue is growing a lot in percentage terms. That is just, it's not a big line item, but that's just interest income with interest rates projected to nearly double next year. And then if you move down to requirements or expenditures, something that might jump out at you is that the fastest growing program is obviously the FPDR 3 PERS contributions, which is the second line in the table. And that's what you would expect to see since we're phasing in the pre-funded PERS plan for that population. That program budget should be growing very rapidly, and it is. We can go to the next slide, Julie. This slide shows you just resources or revenues, if you want to think of them that way, but with the other 4 years of the 5-year forecast also added in. So you can see what revenues are projected to do over the next 4 years, what we're projecting they'll do. And then if you go to the next slide, Julie, you will see a slide that just has requirements or expenditures, but again, with the other 4 years of the 5-year forecast added. Just trying to avoid putting too many numbers on one page for you. So that is all the numbers all at once, all put together, rolled up into their different components, obviously not at a line item level, that I wanted to put in front of you. And then let's kind of dive into some of the big picture things, and then we'll walk through first the expense side of the budget and then the revenue side of the budget. And I'll sum up with some, hey, these are the main things that I think, you should take away from the budget this year. And then we can, answer any questions that I haven't answered as we've gone along and talk about anything you might want to change. But like I said, just ask questions as we go if you have any. And Nick, I'm going to assume that your hand is up from earlier, not because you have a question.
Oh, yes, it is. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, no problem. All right. So moving on to the next slide, Julie.
Okay,
so unlike...
I see Trustee McLeod's hand is up.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Trustee McLeod.
Are you planning to delve into the increase assumptions and those kinds of things and where things are taken from? Like, for example, retirement benefits, the annual projection for those, are those taken from the actuarial reports, or those just a static trend that you're assuming, those kinds of things? Are you going to delve into that, or is this a good time for that question?
Actually, I think it's a great time for that question because some years I really go into that and some years I don't. And I didn't plan to dive deeply into that this year. But it is based on actuarial assumptions. So it's the most complex part of our budget. It takes a long time to put together because we do really detailed projections using all the actuarial assumptions we get from the experience study of, we apply a probability of death in every single year to every single member. We apply a probability of retirement in every single year to every single member. And then we put it all together and we come up with, median numbers for new retirees and all the different categories, median benefit amounts and median benefit amounts for folks who are passing away. And I mean, that is kind of in a nutshell, and then pull it all together so that we do have something that is based on an actuarial experience from our experience study. All of that said, with the budget year, so for next year, so that's what we'll do over the whole 5-year forecast. But for next year, we will sometimes tweak it based on our own personal knowledge. Actuarial projections are meant to be kind of over the long-term trends, and we often have knowledge of something that's happening in the next year that might shift things a bit. So we'll take a look at next year and say, okay, what is happening this year and next year? This year we have 227 payday months. We know that's going to make retirements higher than actuarially projected this year. There's a bonus in the look back for police members this year, so we know more people are going to retire. During the pandemic, deaths were trending above average. So we'll look at those situational sort of things and tweak, and we just call that cushioning. We don't usually take away. I can't think of any time that we did less than what would have been actuarially predicted, but we've sometimes added to the budget for things that we think we might want to add for.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question in
that is
kind of
exactly
a short way?
Yep, that's
Okay.
exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
Okay, great. Great question, really good question. Yeah, this is not the kind of thing that, I guess you could do like a line, just a line projection, but no, we do something much more complicated than that. It's too large of a budget for that, in my opinion. So on this slide, I just like to briefly follow up on some of the things we talked about last year, because unlike all those TV pundits who drive me nuts because they just get up there and say whatever they want and nobody ever makes them come back and say if they were right about all the things that they've said in the past. I like to go back to the prior year, kind of remember what was top of mind last year when we were talking about last year's budget and assess how some of those things turned out in comparison to our projections. And so I just look at what were some of the big big takeaways I left you with last year and what happened. So last year, the three biggest things impacting the budget were inflation, a high fund balance. We had built up a lot of fund balance, and slow hiring, especially at police. So what happened with those things? Inflation, you all probably are at least somewhat aware of what happened with inflation. But how did it do? Inflation has obviously been tempered and slowing. It's still historically high, but it has come way down from where it was. But how did it do compared to our forecast? It came in, as you can see, lower than forecast in 2022 and higher than forecast in 2023, which you would think would be a wash. Did I just say that backwards? I think I just said that backwards. No, that's right. Yes, that's right. Which you would think would be a wash, but that over projection in 2022 actually didn't have a big impact on us. because of the way the city's wage contracts are set up, inflation mostly hits our budget through sworn wages, which in the sworn wage contracts award an annual cost of living adjustment based on inflation, but only up to 5%. So, projecting inflation 7.3, 7.7, whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's only going to be 5% anyway. So that didn't save us much. It does in some other areas, but not in our biggest impact area, which is wages. That 2023 under projection hit us a little bit harder. Oh, yep, we got a question.
Stacy, are we on the right slide?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even notice. Julie, yes, we need to be down. There we go. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Sam. Sorry. Sorry, I didn't notice that we were not on the right slide. Yes. So inflation, that 2023 under projection, I'm talking about kind of the first little flag here on the left, inflation. That hit us a little bit harder, that under projection, but it's still as close as you can reasonably expect when you're making an inflation estimate a year out. There's nothing really to complain about that. I would say all in all, inflation tracked pretty closely to what we thought it would do. 2022 was another historically very high year, and 2023 came back into what I would call the normal range, if still on the high end of that range and still certainly above average. Looking at fund balance, which is the second flag, part of our, and again, Trustee Kramer, since you were here then, part of our reaction to the pandemic years and that year of nearly continuous civil unrest that coincided with the start of the pandemic and produced a lot of sworn retirements, was for us to budget very conservatively, and we built up a bit of extra fund contingency. And we did blow past all of our previous highs. We retired more members than in any previous period. We had more disability claims and costs than in any previous period. And so I'm really glad that we did that, because we were completely financially stable throughout the pandemic. So we didn't have to add that to our list of concerns. But we didn't need quite all of that extra contingency, and we wound up with almost 30 million, about 30 million in fund balance at the end of it all. And my normal target is to carry something like in the $20 million range, something, between 16 and 24 million. So last year I said that I wanted to spend that fund balance down to at least 24 million by July 1st, 2023. We got it down to 26 million. So not quite as far down as I wanted to go. We had underspending on the pension budget and on the PERS contribution budget. But it did come down $4 million, so that's good, and I want to continue with that progress a little bit. In returning some of that money to the taxpayers, but we made good progress on that. We don't need to sit on that much contingency at this point. And then the last flag is just to talk about hiring, where last year we talked a lot about how, the struggle, especially, really the struggle was at the police bureau, that they were having to hire folks and how that was keeping our PERS budget low. So that was saving us money. At least in the short run, and then we would expect a big spike in costs when they were able to hire folks for the PERS contributions. And neither bureau has hired as much as they planned, but police has really significantly picked up hiring. In 22-23, that's their third highest hiring year ever, and almost double their average over the last 15 years. So they didn't do as well as they hoped to. They never do, but they really a big uptick over what had been going on before. Trustee Culp, I don't know if you have any insight into what led to that. Probably a lot of work. I don't see Trustee. I don't even know if Trustee Culp is still with us. Trustee Culp, do you have any thoughts on all that hiring at police?
There's a lot of recruitment going on now. We have so many vacancies, and I think as the economy changes, people are realizing that it's a good job, has a pension, and a lot of folks are looking for something more interesting than what they were doing, I believe. And the folks we're hiring right now are so multifaceted with degrees. I think I've seen more young people hired on now with advanced degrees than I ever have. Um, as society's kind of changing, we're slowly becoming more popular than we were. So I think people are actually filling out applications again.
It's great. Great news for the city of Portland. And it does mean, more costs for us, but that's what we're here for. So it's good to see that turning around, and it didn't turn around so dramatically that we couldn't handle it financially. So that's good. Fire had hoped to hire more than they usually hire because they were hoping to staff up in advance of retirements. But I understand that there are some budget constraints that were imposed on them that kept them from doing that. They had some budget kind of issues going on. So fire never has any trouble hiring as many people as they want, but they sometimes have, there's logistics issues, of course, with getting people trained and through academies. But I think they were hit with some budget issues. Trustee McClowry, I don't know if you have any more insight into it than that. Moving on to, so anyway, that's how things wrapped up. Some of the big topics from last year. Are there any questions about that? Okay, if we can go to the next slide, Julie. Okay, so what's different this year? Everything will be different to Trustee Kramer, but what's different for the rest of you? We, for the first time, I think maybe ever in my time at FPDR, or at least it's been a very long time, none of the sworn labor contracts are currently open or will become open during next year's budget. And since sworn wage increases are a major source of expenditure, uncertainty for us, perhaps the single greatest source of cost growth and the single greatest source of uncertainty, it is really an unusual luxury and very nice to know that we have total certainty about wage levels for the next 18 months. Of course, we don't have certainty about things like overtime and things like that, but we have total certainty about wages. So that is a really good thing. The second thing that's different this year is less good. That's not good at all. This is kind of an amorphous thing in the background that's just been building for many years now. CBO, the City Budget Office, just keeps hitting the alarm about expense growth outstripping revenue growth across the whole city. And, the ringing of that alarm is getting louder and louder and louder. The city doesn't have an immediate need to cut budgets for next year, but the mayor is trying to get in front of that trend a little bit more. And so he has required a 5% automatic budget cut on all the general fund bureaus, except for police, fire, and emergency communications, which is 911 and dispatch. And also a 5% cut for all the internal service funds, like printing and mail and technology and things like that. So it definitely feels like we're entering a period of retraction, and that could ultimately impact FPDR, probably not directly, more likely indirectly through the bureaus that we partner with. For now, police and fire have been held harmless. We'll see what that looks like in future years. And then the final item on this slide is neither good nor bad. It's just something new. As we just mentioned, we're moving to a different form of government. We're moving from this commissioner form of government that we've had, I don't know, I guess since the city was created. I'm not sure about that, a long time, to a city manager form of government with an expanded city council. So each bureau is also going to be part of a service area reporting to a deputy city manager. Our service area will be budget and finance. So that restructuring is going to impact next year's budget in two ways. First, we're going to have some new costs. All city bureaus are going to share the cost of the expanded city council, the new city manager, any associated staff, infrastructure, et cetera. We will also need to share in the cost for the deputy city manager of our service area and their, kind of administrative assistant. We may also, and this would be by choice probably, but take advantage of some opportunities for some shared services across the whole service area. We saw that would be advantageous. So there will be some new costs. I don't expect them to be anything, earth shattering, and maybe in the long run they'll be offset by cost reductions elsewhere, but there will be some new costs coming into the budget. For now, we don't know exactly what they are, so we just have a placeholder in the budget for them, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then the second way that it's impacting this year's budget is what I mentioned before, just that all of that restructuring has pushed the whole process back a couple of weeks, which means that I'm now bringing you a recommended budget that has just a little more, it's a little fuzzier around the edges than it usually is, because we don't have final costs from a few internal services. Some of the technical steps that are taken to allocate costs and from a personnel forecast haven't happened yet. And then some of the shared budget items, particularly with police, are still under final negotiation, although we're at least under $1 million on that stuff. So fortunately, none of those costs are going to be really, really large and impactful to our budget. It's, like I said, it's just a bit fuzzier around the edges than usual for this time of year. Any more questions about things that are different this year? Okay, next slide. All right, so now let's talk about expenses, because usually you talk about revenues and then expenses. Say that every year. Kind of, we do it backwards because we are in the fortunate position of being able to talk about how much money we need, and then we go out and levy taxes to cover our necessary expenses. So this pie chart gives you an overview of our budgeted expenses for next year by program area. And you can see that, pension, FPDR 1 and 2 pension benefits remain, the largest expense, of course, but the FPDR 3 pension contributions are, they're starting to catch up slowly but surely. We just continue that trend. The other programs are remaining kind of a consistent proportion of our overall expenses. I mean, the pie is larger every year because our expenses increase every year. But in terms of the division of those expenses, what we're really just seeing, as we see every year, is that FPDR 3 PERS contributions take up a little bit more of the pie, and FPDR 1 and 2 pension benefits take up just a little bit less of that pie. Did somebody have a question?
I do have a quick question.
Yes.
Can you clarify for us what falls into the administrative expense bucket versus fund management expense bucket?
Yes. So fund, and I have a slide that talks a little bit more about this. So fund management expenses is only general fund overhead, which is money that we pay into this sort of general fund pot that goes to support general citywide services like city council, emergency management, things like that. We have to pay that because we live outside the general fund. It also includes fund contingency, which is kind of like our savings account. And it includes a few fund transfers for citywide debt services, our share of some citywide debts and pension obligation bond debt just for our own personal staff at FPDR. And then it also includes our tax anticipation note expenses. So in budget speak, it includes some fund transfers, debt, contingency, and general fund overhead. They are the expenses of having our own fund, essentially. Administration is probably what you all would think of as the cost of running the plan itself. So that's where all the staff expenses are. That's where the office leases, that's where office supplies are. That's where all the services we buy, whether internally or externally, are. So when we pay the actuaries, when we pay the auditors, when we pay the Internal Bureau of Technology Services, when we pay for programming to our software, all of that is in administration. Does that help?
That does significantly. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so administrative expenses are really the cost of running the plan. Fund management expenses are really sort of the cost of living in our own fund. And those costs are also offset by some revenues because we also get to keep our own interest revenue and things like that. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, Julie.
Stacy, may I ask you a follow-up question to Catherine?
Yes, of course. Of course.
Kind of looks like he froze up, I think.
Oh.
Or just give to us.
Uh-oh.
Oh, Trustee Kramer, I think you had like a connectivity issue and we missed most of that. Can you repeat the question?
Sure, let's try. You're right. I am having connectivity issues. I think it's always worth blaming Xfinity for anything that happens,
For
and
sure.
I'm blaming
For
them
sure.
now, including bad weather or traffic. Are there some pieces of the fund management expenses that we have control over at FPDNR, or are they just and others that are a given?
You have control over the level of fund contingency for sure. And we'll talk about that at the end. So that's kind of the savings account part of it. Like how much money do we want to have on hand for emergencies, unanticipated expenses, unanticipated revenue shortfalls? Definitely have control over that. And that's pretty much it. I was thinking, I'm sort of pausing because I'm thinking about tax anticipation notes, but it's not entirely clear if it's optional for us to issue tax anticipation notes because of the way the charter is written. We choose to issue tax anticipation notes because it has always been financially advantageous for us to do that. There are costs associated with doing that, but there are also revenues because we earn money on the funds while we sit on those funds, and we've always come out ahead. So, but do we have to issue tax anticipation notes to manage our cash flow? We could also build up fund balance to do that, which is what the general fund does. So that's why I was kind of hesitating over that issue. You could debate whether or not we have discretion over that. But really, it's contingency is the only item that the board really has discretion over in that fund management expenses. But contingency is the largest item. It is the largest item. I think I have it set at 14 million for this year, or for next year, for the budget year. Does that answer that question fully, Trustee Kramer? Okay.
Xfinity
I always
needs
think
to work with him again.
I know that's what I was just thinking. I always think of I don't know if anybody watches Parks and Rec or used to watch that TV show Parks and Rec, but I always remember the scene where Chris Pratt, somebody's sick and he types their symptoms into the computer and says, the computer says you have internet connectivity issues. Oh dear. Okay. Well, we will go on to the next slide and we can come back to that question if Trustee Kramer has any follow-up. All right, so now let's go through, let's just have a couple of slides to talk about our major expenses one by one, going from biggest to smallest. So obviously our largest expense is direct FPDR 1 and 2 pension payments. Direct pension benefit costs are growing a bit more rapidly than usual next year. Two reasons for that above average growth. First reason, more retirements than deaths. It's probably somewhat intuitive, right? So far this year, we've had 49 retirements. We're projecting 36 more, mostly in June. And so far this year, we've had 21 deaths. We projected 60 on an actuarial basis, but we're running way under that, interestingly enough. So we could actually turn out to have even fewer deaths and even more retirements this fiscal year than we're already projecting, which would make that even more lopsided. But we are really projecting to have a lot more retirements in the current fiscal year than deaths, which turns into faster growth in pension costs next year. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is that, the high inflation we've had over the last couple of years has driven larger than usual wage increases for sworn employees, which in turn makes those new retirees more expensive because their final pay is larger when they actually do retire. But I do want to point out that even if deaths equaled retirements perfectly, costs would still go up. Because new retirees are more expensive than dying retirees. Deaths are a mix, and there are several reasons for that. Deaths are a mix of members and surviving spouses, and new retirees are obviously always members, and the surviving spouse benefit is virtually always smaller. It's never more, and it's almost always smaller. And then, so that's one reason. Another reason is that most of the deaths are in the FPDR1 population, and all of the new retirees are FPDR2s. And FPDR1s have a less generous pension benefit than FPDR2s. And then, new retiree benefits are initially calculated on final pay, which even in normal times tends to increase faster than the 2% COLA that we can give retirees every year. So all those things, even if everything was equal, costs are going to increase given all those structural factors. But then also on top, so that's why we normally see kind of 5%, 6% growth every year. But we're seeing a little more than that this year because of this imbalance between retirements and deaths, and also higher than usual wage growth. Moving on to the next slide, Julie. Let's take a look at the second biggest part of our budget, which is the PERS contributions that we make on behalf of our FPDR3 members who are sworn employees hired 2007 and later, who are enrolled in PERS for their pension benefits. So this is, the second largest portion of our budget and the fastest growing portion of our budget. And we are really just the funding source for these PERS contributions, but you can see it, increasing at a pretty good clip over the entire forecast period. And there is a little bit of bumpiness in this forecast because one of the contributing factors to growth in this is the PERS contribution rate, and the PERS contribution rate increases biannually. So it increases every other year. It doesn't change annually. So that creates a little bit of bumpiness. So what drives this budget is the number of FPDR3 members, their pay levels, how much they're getting paid, and the PERS rates. So those are really the three things that we have to look at. And we have a table down below there that shows you some of the assumptions that are going into these projections. You see the growth in the FPDR3 population. It's getting larger and larger because every retiree is replaced by a new hire who will be an FPDR3 member. You can see that PERS contribution rates are doing nothing but going up because PERS has an unfunded liability. And so they are going up and have been the full time I've been with the city. And then, of course, we have wage growth. We have both cost of living adjustments, which, as I mentioned, are capped in the sworn labor contracts at 5%. Let me come back to promotional wage growth, but underneath that, we also have what we call, I call real wage growth, although how real is it when there's that 5% cap? But that is wage growth that is built into either the PPA, the PF, or the PFFA. This is actually a blend of the two. Growth above and beyond that wage COLA that we know about that is built into the current PFFA and PPA contracts. That is real wage growth, or at least growth above the wage COLAs on the first line. And then that middle line, promotional wage growth. Now this is, sort of unique to this population because this population are, they're folks who have been on for, around 15 years, and they are now being promoted and receiving specialty premium assignments. So they are having rapider salary growth. Rapider, is that a word? More rapid salary growth than folks who are older, who are towards the end of their career, because they are moving up through the ranks, at least some of them, and into those premium assignments. So economists usually call that drift, but that's not a very friendly term. So we called it promotional wage growth here. So all of those things are happening. And so that's why you get this exponential, growth in the PERS contributions. So it really doesn't look significantly different than it does in the past. This budget is getting bigger and it's getting more complicated to model and forecast because of the spread of this younger population through the workforce. So we're kind of doing this. Yeah, we're doing this like workforce spread modeling that we're not as experienced with, but we're learning as we go. And the other thing that I would just mention about PERS contributions is the impact of overtime, because that is a very unpredictable piece because we do pay PERS contributions on overtime spending. and overtime is volatile in the public safety bureaus. It can be very high. It's hard to control. It's been high for the last year. And so that, we do not know. One of the things we're still discussing with the police bureau, for example, is how much to budget for overtime next year. Is our high levels of overtime continuing? Are they coming down? That used to not matter so much when this budget was smaller, but now it matters more. So trying to get a handle on overtime projections. I mean, really. We'll move on to the next slide. And here, oh, yep.
You were breaking up, at least on my end. Could everyone else hear Stacy just now? She froze for just a minute. Could everyone hear her on the call?
I felt like I could, maybe a little bit of a hiccup, but not much.
Okay, good. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I just got a message that said my internet connection is unstable. I'm in the office, so that's kind of surprising. My goodness. And I see Sam kind of coming and going, and he's in the office too, I wonder. Oh. All right, yeah, Julie, ping me if that happens again, and I'll pause. Does anybody need me to re-say anything from that last slide?
Nope.
Stacy, I'd like to go back to a point if I could.
Sure.
And I had the same experience Julie did, though. Again, I have Xfinity. It looked like in the last chart we saw that we were budgeting roughly at. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was asking Julie to go back to the previous slide. So
that would be great. It looked like we were budgeting roughly 20% increases in PERS contributions, just in rough terms. From 23 actuals to 24 projection, we budgeted more than a 30% increase. Do we have any sense of what the 24 actuals look like? Are they as high as we thought they would be?
They're actually worse than we thought they would be. We only have 1 quarter of expenses in for the current fiscal year. So that's part of what we're kind of, not arguing with police, but debating with police right now. So looking at the first quarter costs, they came in even higher than this, and that is because of overtime spending. And so, so it's even worse. The growth in this budget is really, the first time someone sees it, it's just sort of mind blowing because everything is moving. PERS contribution rates are moving up. Wages are moving up. On top of that, this population is getting promoted and making even more, money, and we're hiring, and it's getting bigger. We're hiring more and more of them every year. So the growth is really off the charts. And then when we add overtime to that, and I don't know this, but we were attempting to do an analysis of, does this younger population work more of the overtime also? In our model, we're assuming that the overtime is kind of proportional. That FPDR2s are as likely to work overtime as FPDR3, but I don't know if that's true. With more seniority, maybe they work less overtime. And Trustee Culp and Trustee McClowry, do you have any insight into that assumption?
I don't think there's any correlation between whether you're tier 3 or tier 2 of overtime. It's sort of proportional. People work it as they work it. It's not related to that. But I am curious, you're saying that the PERS contributions went up, yet the projection was for so many more police and fire than were actually hired. So there was a projection for quite a bit more new hires, yet you're saying so you're saying the overtime was enough to compensate for all those hires that didn't happen?
Yes. And I don't know if it was just an exceptionally bad quarter for overtime, or if it's a little bit of the impact of lateral hires, which we don't budget for in our model, folks coming in at higher than entry. That's another potential issue with the model. because we're seeing more and more of that at both fire and police. I mean, I just don't think there's enough of those for that to really be, I mean, mostly it's overtime. It seems to be. That's what both the fire and police bureaus think as well.
Okay.
Trustee Kramer, does that answer your question?
It does, but I'm glad for Trustee McLaury's follow-up question. That was very helpful.
Okay. I do want to say about PERS contribution rates. Folks should know that those, I mean, obviously everything on here, you know, fiscal year in 24 and beyond is a projection because it hasn't happened yet. We do know that PERS contribution rates, you know, we know that they're 33.91% for the current year and for next year. So those are known. But beyond that, those are the city economist's projected PERS contribution rates, where he just has them going up, you know, 5 percentage points a year from 33.91 to 38.91 and then up to 43.91. So once you're out into the out years, that much growth in the PERS contribution rates, I don't know if that's realistic or not. It may not be that bad. I hope it's not that bad, but it might be. All right, any other questions about PERS contributions? Oh, okay, then Julie, let's go down to the next slide. So at this point, we've talked about, essentially 80% of our budget. So now we're kind of talking about the rest. So disability costs, this is obviously really important programmatically, but it is only 3 or 4% of our total budget. But this is, like I said, it's important programmatically, obviously, and this is also the disability program is, that is the main way that we interact with our active membership is through the disability benefit. I mean, that and retirement workshops and pension estimates. So you can see on this slide, we have it broken into the different components of disability benefits. You can see that we still spend more money on short-term disability than any other type of benefit, but just barely, just a little bit more than medical payments. And you can see us, coming down from, if this slide went back further, you would see even higher highs during the pandemic for short-term disability, but you can still see us coming down from those 23 actuals. So we're still coming down and projecting to spend less. We came up quite a bit in medical payments from the prior year. Again, we saw during the pandemic that medical costs actually stayed low because COVID claims are not expensive medically, and people put off and the hospitals kept delaying more expensive procedures. And now we see medical costs coming back and forth. And then, I would just say long-term disability work subsidies, which is where if the Bureau can find work for someone to do on modified duty while they wait to recover from an injury, we will pay their salary while they do that, or we'll pay 75% of their salary. And then that last component down there, funeral benefits, which it's not really so much, it's part of this program, but those are mostly for folks who are part of the pension population, people who are in their 80s and 90s, hopefully most of the time. Those are essentially, holding steady. So we really just are growing those things in the out years by wage growth. If it's a wage replacement benefit, as is the case with short-term disability or long-term disability, we're growing it by medical cost inflation factors, if it's medical costs, and then growing funeral benefits also by wage inflation because it's a percent of wages, the funeral benefit, and also same with return to work subsidies, since that's also a wage-driven benefit. Any questions about disability benefits? All right, let's go on to the next slide.
Catherine's got a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I do, but it's not relating to disability benefits. It was really kind of a follow-up question relating to the earlier discussion about the PERS contribution increases. And I just want to verify that, I appreciated your explanation about the first couple of years being known, rate levels that the PERS is communicated, but subsequent to that, thinking that it's probably a 5% per year, some increase that you've extrapolated. Just confirming, that's not affecting the current budget in any way whatsoever. That's strictly for forecasting. So
Yep.
even if you were off, significantly one way or the other, that's not going to affect the current budget at all.
No.
Correct?
No,
Okay.
no.
Thank you.
No, not this year. And because next year we know what the rate would be. And I think we always know by this time what the next year's rate will be. We find that out in September, even in the biannual years. Yeah, so those projections that the city economist comes up with, that he does come up with in consultation with Milliman, who are also the PERS actuaries. Yeah, they don't ever wind up impacting the actual
Okay,
budget.
thank you.
Just
Yeah,
the
I mean,
forecast.
as you mentioned, it's a very complex thing. PERS has their own unfunded liability and, how they allocate that and assign those costs for paying that down and how that translates into future long-term contribution rates is something that you're just relying necessarily on other people to come up with those best estimates for now.
Right. And you can see, like, when you know something is that complicated and you just see it going up 5%, you're like, what? That doesn't seem. But actually, I personally prefer that. I'm always telling my staff, like, I don't want to be falsely precise. I think, when you're like, well, that tells us right up front, this is a WAG, this 5%. And so at least there's transparency about that. This is a total guess. And because there are so many moving parts with that PERS, I mean, even Milliman can't. I mean, we got to get stock market returns, all these things that are so nobody can predict. It's so hard to guess. Other than that, we know it's probably still got to go up to pay down that unfunded liability. And then there's rate coloring and how that will impact it. And it starts to get really complicated.
All right, thank you.
But yes, not impacting, fortunately, that complex and consequential of an estimate is not impacting the current year budget. So that's a very good point. Thank you, Chair McLeod. So moving on to the next couple of slides, which talk about the administration of the plan. So this first chart, so this is not about, to Chair McLeod's point earlier, this is not about fund management expenses, which I'll talk about a little bit more at the very end of the presentation. This is, like I said, probably what most people would think of as the cost of running the plan. So the pie chart here shows you what are all the things that we, how it breaks down, that we spend most of our administrative budget on personnel, about 60%. And then the next largest chunk is actually on internal city services. Those are things like the Bureau, like technology, all of our laptops and monitors and cell phones, things that we're required to pay into, like, we have to pay our share of the city's enterprise management software. We have to pay our share of the city's risk management, insurance things. We have to pay for printing and mailing and all of those sort of city internal services. That also includes the city attorney's office, paying for services from them. And then beyond that, smaller pieces are services that we pay for from external vendors. And examples of that are folks that we pay to help us, to help the disability folks review claims. Milliman, our actuaries, our auditors, things like that. And then for a space for us to work in, our office lease, some software for the Bureau, and then some other, kind of miscellaneous things. This pie chart really looks, again, pretty similar to how it looked in the past. Administrative expenses are less than 2% of our budget. They are growing, however, I do want to make the board aware. Right now, we have growth of more than 11% for next year's budget in administrative spending, which is a big number. But a big chunk of that is because of this placeholder that we plopped in to budget for new costs associated with this government restructuring, and those are in internal services. And we don't know if we need all that money. We just didn't want to. We want to make sure we had it if we needed it. We have no idea if it will be that high. If I took that placeholder out, growth for next year's administrative spending would be 7.3%, which still seems like a lot, but I'll talk about that more on the next slide. And then, like I said, the division of costs is pretty similar to how it's been in past years. So Julie, let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit about how costs are growing in the administrative side of the budget.
Oh, okay, but I
Tom.
do see Trustee Kramer's hand up.
Okay, thanks guys. I can't see hands. I can't see everybody on the screen. Okay, yes, Trustee Kramer. So thank you, Julie and Sam and everybody else. Yes, trustee
Thank you,
Kramer.
Stacy. And you may be just about to get to this. Under internal materials and services on actually the next slide, it says largest item, city attorney's office, 352K.
Mhm.
And I was guessing that that probably didn't include Lauren, that he would be under the external vendors. And I don't mean to offend Franco or anyone else, but how do we get to that number? I mean, lawyers
So-
are obviously worth anything we pay them, but that was an eye-catching number.
I know. So sadly for Franco, not all of that money is Franco's salary. I don't know if Franco's still here. I assume, yep, there he is. He's just not on camera. No, we don't pay Franco that much, sadly. So the city attorney's office, it is a large number, but that is salary and benefits for Franco, plus salary and benefits for at least part of a paralegal. Plus some other services that we grab from the city attorney's office on kind of an ad hoc basis. So we use quite a lot of legal services. We on two fronts really. The first on the disability side, where whenever someone appeals their disability claim, we need representation for that, for someone to go and present the fund's point of view on the claim denial, and carry that through. And then folks often appeal those, all the way up through the process, all the way up to, I forget how far up it can go. Kim and Sam and Franco could tell you. And then on the other side of that is that, we haven't had this recently, but there can be sort of union grievance related stuff that we need to get legal opinions on, even though we're not directly involved in those, and things like that. So yeah, it's like, when you just think of it as legal services, Lauren, we don't spend very much money on. He just bills us on an hourly basis. Our overall legal expenses are not very, very large, in my opinion, as part of the budget. But yeah, it is more than Franco.
Yeah,
in that number.
And those disability, the contested cases can go, there's really 5 levels possible: hearing, administrative, appeal, writ of review at the circuit court, appeal to the Oregon Court of Appeals, and then less frequently, appeal to the Oregon Supreme Court. So there's one case could be argued 5 times, potentially.
So even though a very small percentage of claims are denied, I don't know what percentage of claim denials are appealed, and I don't know if Kim knows off the top of her head, but yeah, that takes up I don't know, Franco, quite a bit of your time, I would say.
I'd have to look at that, Stacy, for the percent. I know that our percentage of claims denied this past fiscal year is like 10%. I don't think it's half of those, maybe. I'd have to look, so I can get back.
Does that answer your question well enough, Trustee Kramer?
Well enough, thank you.
Okay. And since, thank you, Trustee Kramer, for moving us on to the next slide. So let me talk about, the 2 biggest things in the administrative budget are obviously personnel, and then things we buy internally from other city bureaus or from externally from others. So for personnel, I just want to remind the board, and tell Trustee Kramer for the first time, that the board can control the number of positions at FPDR and the job classifications. And Sam and myself and Kim can control merit pay raises within these kind of prescribed ranges for the non-represented staff. But everything else is mandated by the city compensation plan, or external forces, like, how much health insurance costs under the health insurance coverage the city has negotiated, what payroll taxes are, what PERS rates are, things like that. So that's sort of the division of what's within the board's control and what is not. Yes, Trustee Kramer?
Just on a minor point on that one, Stacy, the health insurance variable in the second bullet is huge, between $6K and $27K per employee. Can you tell us a little about that?
Welcome to government employment. No, the city, like many government employers, has really, really generous health insurance benefits. And the range is large because the range, the $6,000 range, I believe I think that's the cost. We have a couple of employees, including me, who opt out entirely of medical insurance because it's provided by a spouse or something, but opt in for dental. So I think like that $6,000 is me and maybe one other employee. At the high end, the $27,000 annual, that's full coverage, vision, dental, medical for an entire family. And so that's the range for the health insurance plan. And it's very generous. It's a very generous health insurance plan. And Trustee Kramer, I actually have like the most interesting story to tell you at the end if we have time when we get to the board expenditure summary. When you were asking about the personnel budget last time, which caused me to go digging around, and I found out like a kind of funny, interesting thing about health insurance costs that's been happening this year. So, but I'll save that for the end because I don't want to get us off track. But yeah, that it is a large number. And that's not something the board has any control over because the city, human resources negotiates that and it offers the same, suite of benefit options to all city employees. So we have no control over that number. So those first two bullets under personnel are really telling you what's included in that $3.3 million that we're spending on personnel. Where it says percent, that's a percent of wages. And then the remaining bullets tell you the cost increases that we've built into the personnel budget. I will say that we have since learned, since I sent this out to you, what the wage COLA will be. It'll be 3.3% because we got the actual wage COLA. Again, this is built into all the city's labor contracts. Most of our staff are represented. Most of our staff, though, don't have a current labor contract because it's open right now, but assuming that they get what is the normal case at the city, which is not to get too wonky, anyway, I won't get too wonky. It's a particular index that's second half to second half, and we now know that that'll be 3.3%. So that is like an automatic wage increase that city employees are going to be able to expect on July 1st, 2024. We have one employee who will get a bigger raise because she's not at top of range. And then some employees may get merit pay increases of as much as 2%. And that could also change because anybody who's not represented is at the discretion of council guidance and their manager. And the CPPW employees are the folks who have an open contract right now. So I'm not quite sure how that will all shake out. Moving on to internal materials and services, which really, Franco, you got a question?
Well, I just wanted to note that CPPW bargaining starts literally tomorrow morning.
Oh.
Is the first bargaining session, and then the minimum time period for bargaining is 150 days, which probably doesn't have any impact on this presentation, but gives an idea of when there could be a contract for that union.
So yeah, it could be that we're not looking at, if there's a wage increase, it might wind up being paid later in the fiscal year, but retroactive. Then it's usually made retroactive to July 1st, so it kind of comes out the same. But that is so I was so excited that we didn't have any open labor contracts for sworn employees, but we do have an open labor contract for our own employees, but that is much less impactful than the sworn labor contracts in terms of our budget. Thanks, Franco. In internal materials and services, these are really growing a surprising amount, especially given that growth is after the internal service funds have applied the mayor's 5% cut. So I had to, really sit back when they started sending those costs over. But so remember, again, a big part of what you're seeing is that placeholder that we have for the city, any extra costs we have to pay related to the city government restructuring. But the other big driver is technology services, where over in technology services, the labor contract that governs IT staff awarded really fairly large salary increases. And so this is the last year of those salary increases. There are also several new IT projects that were approved by council that are citywide impact and citywide cost, things like the new website, a new online help service, new information security kind of measures that we have to pay for. And then on top of all that, they're building out new IT infrastructure for this new expanded city council and chambers, a bigger city council chambers. So all the the Bureau of Technology Services charges that are just being shared out across the whole city are growing quite a bit. And then if we look down at kind of everything else, which has the external materials and services and office lease and other miscellaneous items, software, everything else is growing as well, by less than personnel and less than internal services, but still a little more than inflation, although that a little bit more growth in this category is really an artifact of the additional actuarial services that we buy on a biannual basis, because we buy the fund levy adequacy analysis and the fund valuation only every other year. So you get a bigger, increase in growth for those actuarial costs in the off years. And then we also budget very conservatively for capital because it is a small item and it's its own line item in local budget law. We have to be careful not to overspend it. Capital for us is just programming improvements to our software. So the reason there. Let me pause and ask if there are questions about administrative expenses or any expenses at all before I talk about revenues. See none. All right, let's move on to revenues. Revenues are so much more straightforward than expenses because there's really only one important revenue, and that's property taxes. If you remember, that beginning fund balance is just leftover property taxes from prior years. For the most part, it's pretty much all property taxes. We do have a few little slices of revenues from other sources that I'll talk about in a minute, but pretty much it's all property taxes. So let's move on to the next slide and talk about property taxes. So property taxes, I told you they were growing quite a bit this year. So we believe that we're going to need about $222 million in property taxes next year, which is almost 15% more than last year, as I mentioned in the beginning. So there are two reasons for that. The first is that our expenses are growing 10.3%, which you could see on the first slides. That is driven by 22% growth in PERS contribution costs and 7% growth in direct pension benefit costs. So just to keep up with our expenses, we've got to go up by 10.3%. And all things being equal, given the way we're funded, our tax revenue is going to need to grow by the same percentages as expenses every year, all things being equal. But all things are not equal this year because we grew the levy less than expenditure growth last year and the year before while we were using up some of that excess fund balance. So that means that the increase from last year's levy as a percentage is just higher because we are sort of catching up now. And that, goes back to that debate about whether it's, that I'm always having in my mind, about whether or not it's better to smooth the property tax levy or whether it's better to not sit on any unneeded taxpayer funds. When we're being careful not to hold on to any taxpayer money we don't need, it gives you bumpier growth in the levy as we go along. And so it's always a debate in my mind. Is it better to have smooth but steady growth, or to make sure that we are making sure to get that money back in taxpayer hands whenever we have more than we need? But that does make the growth bumpier. You have years with really slow growth and years with faster growth. But so that is why taxes are growing as much as they are for next year. Questions about property taxes? I have a little bit more about property taxes on the next slide, so maybe let's talk about that before I pause.
Stacey, may I ask you?
Yes.
Where do you come down on that smoothing versus not smoothing?
You can tell that I'm always having that debate in my mind. I think it's good to keep both things in mind. I do, but I think I wind up erring on the side of not holding on to taxpayer money I don't need. Because if I just think if it was my money, I would rather have it in my pocket as long as I could have it in my pocket. And if that means that, okay, well, now my bill went up a little more as a percentage this year than it did last year, at least I held on to my money as long as I could. There's no getting around the fact that our bills are going to keep going up. That's the design of what we're doing here. But I think it's a valid point of view to say that, you know, sudden jumps are not desirable for folks when they're planning. When you get down and look at it on a household by household basis, you're not talking about a lot of money, you know. So that's the other thing to remember. We're not suddenly hitting people with a bill that's $1,000 more than it was last year. You know, it'd be more like $10 more or something like that. So I tend to err on the side of making sure we're not holding on to taxpayer money we don't need. But I understand the other side of that equation or that consideration too. And then on this slide, just wanting to show you some of the assumptions that go into thinking about property taxes and then what kind of property tax rate we wind up with based on those assumptions and what we think we need to raise in terms of tax revenue. So if you look at the chart at the bottom, the AV rate, so this is what the rate is per $1,000 of assessed value, what people actually pay property taxes on. And the blue line is the RMV rate, what people actually pay per $1,000 of, well, no, I shouldn't say actually pay because it's not an actual thing at all. But what the property tax rate would be as per $1,000 of real market value. And that's the RMV rate down below. We care about the RMV rate for one reason and one reason only, because that's what the cap in city charter is based on. So that $2.80 cap we have is based on the real market value rate. So we pay close attention to it, but actual property taxpayers pay their taxes based on that AV rate. So it is always useful to look and see, okay, what's going to happen with that rate. I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. Real market value growth on the top line, 0% for fiscal year in 24. That was a projection. We needed to update that. We have the actual now. It's come in at 0.15%, pretty close to zero. And then the city economist is projecting 0% growth again next year. Not negative, because we have had negative growth in some years, but basically no growth. And that is related to concerns about commercial properties, mostly downtown commercial properties. So what that is doing is it means that our RMV rate is going up a little faster than we thought it would. Because, you know, and it's not that that's the only reason, but when we're not growing RMV at all, we're not growing the denominator. And so the rate is growing much faster. So if you look down at the bottom table, which is in the middle of the slide, you'll see that that we're now projecting a tax rate for next year, an RMV tax rate of 136. A few years ago, we were projecting that would only be 130 in fiscal year 24-25. And now we're projecting it'll be 136. And that's mostly because of that very slow RMV growth. Trying to think if there's anything else that I really want to point out to you on this slide. You do see big assessed value growth in the current fiscal year, and that is urban renewal areas returning to the regular property tax rolls. So nothing it's not as exciting as it looked in the AV growth. Although maybe it only looks exciting to people like me. All right, any questions about property taxes before we move on? And Trustee Kramer, I'm not sure if these things about compression and discounts and delinquencies make sense to you. You might not have ever seen them before. If not, you can ask me now or we can talk later.
Either one. If they're not of interest to anyone else, I'll ask you later because you're right, they're new to me.
Those are basically, let me just say briefly, and then maybe we can talk later. Those are losses we expect. Like we're gonna tell everybody to pay us a certain amount of money, but some people won't. So that's delinquencies, right? They just will say, no, we're not gonna pay you. Okay, so we're gonna lose some money from people who just refuse to pay us. Discounts are people who pay, as most people do. But if we didn't get we didn't guess right about how many people are going to pay up front and get that little discount, then there's some losses there. Compression is related to the intricacies of Oregon's property tax law, which caps property taxes at $10 per $1,000 of real market value on each individual property. So some properties are in compression, some properties are not. We are one of the last levies to get compressed, but if there's enough compression on an individual property, we can be compressed, which means that the property already has so much taxes on it that we can't get our full taxes out of it. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so all of those assumptions come from the city economist, from Peter Husselman, the city economist. All right, moving on to the next slide. We're getting there, guys. Sorry, I know we have a full agenda, so let me managing the fund. So we were talking about, Chairman Cloud was talking about fund expenses. So let me just say again that, funds are a totally foreign concept to folks who don't live in government, because funds are not used extensively in the private sector. I mean, they do exist, but in governmental accounting and finance, everything lives in a fund. And a lot of the services you think of as core city services live in the general fund, like the police bureau and the fire bureau and the parks department and things like that. But things that have a dedicated revenue source that need to be segregated in some way for some reason, or there could be other reasons to segregate, live in their own fund. So obviously we live in our own fund because we are fiduciary responsibility of the city. We have our own dedicated revenue source. We can only spend money for very certain things. So we live in our own fund. So that means that we have to do a few things. One is that we need to have some fund balance. So why do we have fund balance? Why don't we just spend our fund down to $0? The same reason you don't spend your checking account, down to $0. Some of it is because you need to manage daily cash flow. So you can just think of that as the cushion you keep in your checking account to make sure you don't overdraw. Last year, for example, in 22-23, our average daily cash balance was about 75 million, but our lowest daily cash balance was 5.2 million, and our highest was 160.3 million. So, there's a lot of variability in there. So there's a cash flow aspect to this, cash flow management. And then the other reason is contingency, which you can just think of as like your personal emergency fund. So that is money that we want to have on hand if we need to spend more than we planned or budgeted for, or if our revenues fall short for some reason, then we need to have that money on hand. And then fund balance is just where sort of extra savings or extra revenue also goes to live. Again, just like in your checking account. If we spend less than we planned or budgeted, it falls to fund balance, or if revenues are higher than expected, it falls to fund balance. I mentioned earlier that, I target a fund balance sort of in the 7% of annual expenditures range, which winds up being in that $15 to $20 million range. We built it up over the pandemic to make sure that we could have lots of financial certainty and stability, and then you can see us spending that down now. And so I'm hoping to spend that down even further and ideally hit our target by 2024. I'm a little concerned about that because it looks like we may be over collecting on property taxes. Like some of those assumptions from the city economist last year may have been a little too conservative. So we'll see where we wind up at the end of the year, but that is still my goal, is to spend that fund balance down. And then I just have some notes at the bottom of the slide about some of the other things that happen when you live in your own fund. Like I mentioned before, we have to pay our share of these citywide general services. We have to manage our own cash flow, part of which is managing fund balance, but another aspect of which is issuing TANs every year. But we also get to keep interest earnings on our own fund balance. And those are all sort of the trade-offs of having to manage your own fund. If you're a bureau that lives in the general fund, the city economist does all that stuff for you. But we have to do it for ourselves because we don't. All right, any questions about that before I wrap up? All right. Let's just hit these last two slides then. So on the last slide, I mentioned, that one of the purposes of fund balance is to serve as fund contingency to deal with any risks to the budget. So what are the risks to the budget? Some risks are structural, by which I mean that they're there every single year. There are always risks that we know, things that could, go up or down every year. And some are specific to a certain set of external circumstances in any given year, and so they're sporadic. And then obviously some risks are bigger than others, and they could be bigger either because they're more, in other words, more risky because they're more volatile, or they could be riskier just because small changes would have big dollar impacts. So this slide shows what I and my staff think are the 6 major financial risks to next year's budget. The bigger the dot, the bigger the risk. I keep experimenting with different slides. So June 2024 is an example of something. So you can see, the things I think are the biggest risks are June 2024 retirements and property tax losses. So June 2024 retirements is an example of something that I think is a big risk because it's extremely unpredictable and volatile. We might have 10 retirements in June, we might have 100. I mean, really, it's, we've made a guess, we could be way off. Property tax related risk is an example of something that's risky because very small changes can have big dollar impacts. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. So, if delinquencies are 4.7% instead of 4.5%, well, that's, turns into quite a lot of money. And this year, that risk is amplified by the continuing above average uncertainty about RMV growth and continuing above average uncertainty about property tax delinquencies, all of which is really focused on commercial properties, particularly downtown real estate, as leases continue to expire and several of those commercial downtown properties get into trouble. There's concern about defaults and property tax delinquencies and losses in market value on that side. So that risk is always there. It's amplified this year. The only risks on this slide that are really specific to just this year are the June 2024 retirements and the city government restructuring. All the rest of these risks are really structural and they're always present to a greater or lesser degree. I just mentioned the property tax risk is larger this year than normal, but it's always there. So every year, my staff and I also attempt to monetize these risks as kind of an exercise of saying, okay, well, what do we think, is a reasonable estimate of what the costs, if things went sideways with some of these things, what would the cost associated with that be? And we come out to a little under 10 million when we monetize these costs, but remember, we're definitely guessing. There's a huge range, obviously. But that's where we landed. So how do we manage that risk? Well, we have fund contingency, which we've set at 14 million, or that's what we've recommended to you all this year. The second thing we do is we err slightly, just slightly, on the side of conservatism in budgeting for items that are particularly volatile or items that are high impact line items. So those are the two ways that we really try to manage those risks. Questions about the risks to the forecast and the budget? Oh, all right, last slide. You're almost there, guys. Well, that's not going to get better because the next thing we're going to talk about is ASOP 4, which Lauren can probably make it pretty exciting, I'm guessing. But so as always, I like to end with just a few key takeaways that I hope will stick in your minds as the things that I think are things that really stick out at me and the rest of the finance staff about this year's budget. And that I always want to make sure I talked about at some point during the presentation if I didn't hit on them hard enough during the presentation. The first thing is that the current fiscal year, I've talked about June retirements. It really has the potential to come in second to only fiscal year 2021 as the year with the most FPDR retirements ever. Just like in fiscal year 2021, there are two 27 pay date months this year. But unlike in fiscal year 2021, one of those months is the last month of the fiscal year, June, which means we probably won't have time to adjust next year's budget if we've underestimated retirements this year. So it's riskier than usual. Why so many retirements this year? 227 pay date months, as I just mentioned. Fairly long gap since the last 27 pay date month. The last one was July of 2022. And then we have one in December 2023, and we'll have another one in June of 2024. So July 2022 to December 2023, fairly long gap. There is a one-time bonus for PPA members that will be in their look back if they retire in June. We had unusually large wage increases for both PFFA, PPA, and PPCOA on July 1st, 2023 that will go into their June retirement. The June retirements always have an extra incentive because as long as they're retired by July 1st, they have historically received the pension COLA. So then they would get that immediate pension COLA as well. So all of those things are making June look pretty good to a lot of people. So I think, we're in for a doozy of a retirement year. The second thing, and I've talked about this enough, I think, is that, this really low or non-existent RMV growth means that our RMV tax rate is growing just a little bit faster than we had previously anticipated. Still nothing to be concerned about in terms of hitting the cap, but faster than we thought earlier. Third, it looks like inflation is cooling off, but the last couple of years have pushed us onto a permanently higher cost curve. Inflation isn't like stock prices. Where, when you have a few big years, they'll be offset by some negative years. There isn't, or hopefully there isn't negative inflation or deflation. That's not something anybody wants. So we're not going to have deflation, ideally, to offset the high inflation we've had for the last few years. That cure would be worse than the disease. So the inflation we've experienced over the last few years, which has driven up costs and particularly soaring wages, beyond previous expectations, that's part of our new life now. And that's permanently shifted our cost curve up a bit. And then on top of all that, we don't know for sure that historically high inflation is done with us even now. We'll have to see how the next 6 months shake out. And finally, that the PERS contribution budget, as I mentioned, is both getting harder to predict and it's having larger impacts on our overall budget, which is not really news. We knew that day would come. In the very beginning, PERS contributions were this tiny part of our budget, and they were very predictable. We used to do the budget literally like person by person, like we knew the names of all of them, and we literally did it by individual. Because the only factor that you really had to account for was the little step increases they would have as police officers or firefighters and hiring. But now there's, hiring and attrition to account for. The budget is large enough that volatile pieces like overtime actually, can really matter. But the hardest part, as I mentioned, is just trying to model the spread of those FPDR members through the workforce as they promote and move into those premium assignments. So in 15 years, it'll actually be more manageable than it is right now, because then the entire workforce will be covered by PERS. So we won't have to model that spread. We'll just need to account for hiring, attrition, and the variable pieces like overtime. Of course, then the budget will be larger, though. So the impact of making a wrong guess will be larger, but it'll be easier to model. So those are the 4 things that I think are really worth taking away from the budget presentation about this year. And before I ask about final questions and any changes the board might want to see, if there's anything you want to revisit, let me see if there's any more questions. Trustee Cramer.
Thank you. So I want to go all the way back to slide 4, if we may.
Okay.
And just go over the growth in the administration expenses, if we could.
Okay.
So what I'm seeing, if I'm reading it correctly, is that the projection for the current fiscal year is 4.9 million.
Mm-hmm.
And the recommended budget for the next fiscal year is 5.46 million, if I'm reading it correctly.
Right.
So does that work out to about a $560,000 increase annually?
Let me just pull up our A line and I can tell you exactly the increase.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Julie.
Um, let me give you the exact dollar amount. Yes, so our projection for this year is $4,903,877. Sounds very precise. And next year's budget, as recommended to you, is $5,460,527. And so the difference between those two is $556,650. Yeah, so about $500,000.
And I'm afraid you told us this, but I'm sorry, I don't remember. How much of that is attributable to sort of the uncertainty relating to the charter change?
You're very clever and have noticed that I deliberately did not say that amount because I was trying to avoid saying it publicly because there is a negotiating aspect to this with other with other city bureaus, and I don't want them to know how much money we've set aside. But that is a legitimate question, so let me answer it. We've set aside $200,000 for that. I think that is very high. I think it is unlikely that we will need of that 200,000. We've only committed 15,000 so far. So I think that is really high. But of the growth, so with that $200,000 in there, that's 11.35% growth. And if I take that $200,000 out and pretend it's not there, then the growth is, I just got to go back to that number. Then the growth is, where did it go? 7.3% without that 200,000.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay, glad that was helpful. And good catch. I was trying to be silent on that 200,000. Other questions or parts of the budget that the board would like to revisit?
None for me.
Nope, thank you.
Nice graphics, very readable.
Oh, good. I'm glad. We always try to make our fonts big. I myself can't stand tiny fonts. Julie, if we could go down to that very second to last slide, where it just sort of says, I guess, questions, which we've just kind of clarified that doesn't sound like we have anymore. Doesn't sound like there's anything that the board wishes to change. So if we can flip to the last slide, I'm sure you'll interrupt me if I'm wrong and there is anything you want to change. We will need a motion to adopt the budget, but before we talk about that, I want to say, as I say every year, that this year is a little more serious than usual. I want to make sure that the board understands that we always have to make some minor technical adjustments to the budget after you adopt it to accommodate changes that the mayor or council make to budgets elsewhere in the city where they intersect with our budgets. So that would usually happens on the police or fire side, in the police or fire budgets, but it could also happen in an internal service budget. And then we just need to make little adjustments where we intersect with them. So when that happens, I always come back to you if it's anything that is significant, either financially or programmatically, and talk to you about it at whatever the next meeting is when I can talk to you. March, May, could even be as late as July. So I just want you to be aware of that possibility. This year, that is going to happen, and there's going to be more of it because of those structural reforms to city government that I was just talking about, which are still being ironed out, still being costed, and also those delays in the citywide budget process, which means that there's just more pieces that are up in the air at this time. I don't think any of those things are going to turn into $1 million costs. I still think we're talking about small potatoes within the context of our overall budget, but I want to be transparent that there's going to be a little more of that this year. And there's just unfortunately nothing I can do about that. But I will definitely come back to you at the next meeting or the next meeting or the next meeting and talk to you about any change that is financially or programmatically significant that is coming our way because of changes elsewhere that we need to intersect with.
Stacey, thank you very much. That was a very fine presentation. I felt like we got some good discussion and it was very easy to follow. So thank you. And yes, good discussion and questions along the way. Are there any other questions from any of the other trustees before we make a motion? All right, then I'll entertain a motion to adopt the budget as for 24-25 as presented to us.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Second.
Thank you. And all those, any subsequent discussion? I'm assuming none. Okay, then all those in favor of passing this, say aye.
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 And opposed? All right. Thank you very much, Stacey. Thank you again. Much
Yes,
appreciated.
thank you very much, board.
Okay, well, that concludes our action items, but we have a very long list of some interesting information items for today. And the first one is as a memo presented by council, FPDR council, Lauren Downhour, on actuarial standard of practice number 4. So Lauren, can I turn this over to you?
You can. It's good that Stacey probably wore all you out, so I expect I'm going to put you on sleep.
Well, thanks, Lord.
That was a lengthy and well done presentation. Thanks.
That's the kind of opening act you want, for sure.
It is. It is. I will try to live up to the job you just did. So you all have received a copy of a memo that my office prepared concerning some issues pertaining to public comments received on the application of actuarial standards of practice number 4 on the services that Milliman is contracted to perform for you. The concern was either that the actual agreement with Milliman was defective because it didn't require you, or it didn't require Milliman to perform the work that would be required if, in your specific case, the levy adequacy study was treated as a funding valuation for purposes of ASOP 4. Or there was a transmittal memo that Stacey, as FPDR staff, prepared for the board to consider when it was reviewing the new Milliman service agreement. That memo had stated somewhere in the memo that because the FPDR is not a funded plan, certain services or reports that would generally be prepared by an actuary doing that work would not be required. And that included the determination of actuarially determined contributions, as well as other reports and studies, or not studies, other valuations that would be typically prepared by an actuary when performing a valuation for a fund that actually had assets. So again, public comments were made by Mr. Matches, Kevin Matches, saying that he believed that either ASOP, the Milliman contract was deficient because it didn't require Milliman to perform the things that would be required to do under ASOP 4, or that there was something defective with the memo, and that it indicated that Milliman was instructed not to perform those particular deliverables when it had to. Again, it's not entirely clear what the complaint was, but regardless of what the exact complaint was. The issue is for Milliman, as well as the fund or the FPDR, does ASOP number 4 apply to the work that Milliman is being contracted to perform? We've looked at ASOP 4, the language of ASOP 4, the language of the services agreement with Milliman, knowing the nature of the work that we're asking them to perform, reviewing the commentary underneath ASOP 4, and again, from a legal perspective, the way I read the ASOP 4, I don't think this is a funding valuation because we're not actually asking Milliman to tell us how much money we need to save for the future. We're asking them to tell us, hey, when we look at our costs in the future, do you think those costs will exceed our ability to tap into the levy? And if so, what does that mean? Now, from FPDR standpoint, it probably doesn't mean anything. It just means that instead of relying on the levy, we're going to rely on the city to come up with an alternate source of revenue to pay the benefits. Because although the charter anticipates that the levy will be the main source of funding for these benefits, the revenue source to pay the benefits, if for some reason we hit the levy cap, that doesn't mean that the city doesn't have to pay the benefits, right? It's really just a risk analysis to see, do we need to worry about levy adequacy in the future? It's not what we would typically view as a true funding valuation, where we're looking at how much money do we need to set aside to pay these benefits. In talking to Milliman, they said, well, right, those professional standards apply to us, and we're required as a matter of the standards to do our work consistent with those standards. If we conclude that ASOP 4 does apply, then we're going to have to do that work even if you didn't ask us to. I think more likely they would come back and say, hey, it turns out we need to do this extra work, so we're going to need to revise the service agreement because we're not going to work for free. But the sole source of, or the sole determiner of whether or not ASOP 4 would apply to a unique fund like this one would be the Actuarial Board of Counseling and Discipline, which is a unit of the Actuarial Standards Board. Now, Mr. Magis had indicated that he had reached out to a number of actuaries who had either reached out to them or had read the ASOP and concluded that ASOP 4 did apply. He couldn't give us names or examples of, who did you talk to so that we could talk to them. But Milliman has said that they are planning to, and may already have, reached out to the ABCD to ask them for an opinion as to whether or not they believe ASOP 4 would apply to the funding evaluation analysis or levy adequacy analysis that they are generally providing to the fund. And again, if they conclude that ASOP 4 does apply, that is, that the levy adequacy analysis is a, quote, funding valuation for purposes of ASOP 4, then Milliman's going to come back to us and explain the decision that has been conveyed to them by the ABCD. And basically at that point, we'll have to sort of cross that bridge when we come to it. And see what that means, what additional work will Milliman have to perform in the event the ABCD concludes that we are subject, that this work is subject to ASOP 4. Hopefully they come back with it's not, because you actually are a pay-as-you-go plan, and there is no funding that you are asking Milliman to actually calculate. Again, our point is that the funding for the levy adequacy analysis is really just helping us come up with the source of the money. We're not so concerned with the amount of the money. I mean, obviously the amount of the money comes into that is part of the analysis, but it's not the end goal of the analysis. The end goal is just, hey, you got this levy. Will we ever exceed the levy coming up with money that we need to pay the benefits and the other costs of the fund? Trustee Kramer, you have a question?
Yes, if I'm not interrupting your train of thought, though, Lauren.
Not at all.
And if the question may put you more on the spot than you want, and I'll leave you free to answer as much or as little as you want.
Okay.
We have a 5-year contract with Milliman. That runs through spring of 28. They're required by that contract to perform their duties in a certain manner.
That's correct.
We don't get to do that. What proper actions on their part is, as you said, is determined in part by the ABCD. So I would have thought, in a simple-minded way, that if ABCD comes back and says, yes, you have to do this, Milliman, that Milliman's arguing uphill with us.
They may be, and I really can't say what, if they had a mistake of fact, or I'm not sure what it would be, if the contracting parties, didn't have a meeting of the minds, everybody thought that they wouldn't have to do this work. FPDR said, we don't want you to do this work. And then Section 6.7 of the service agreement, which says they have to perform the work in accordance with their own professional standards, comes into play. Does that mean that, notwithstanding the fact that their own professional standards requires them to prepare this extra work that nobody thought they'd have to do, would it mean that they're still bound by the terms of that contract? I'm not going to get, I don't want to get into that sort of let's cross that bridge when we get to it. Again, it's been too many years since I took contract in law school to remember, is this an X-ray peerless situation, or is this a Ruckelshaus one that was repellent for a cow? All of which brings back a little bit of PTSD, to be frank. So I think the answer is we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there, and see what Milliman says. Because we can't force them to do the work. They could, if we take the position that they have to do this work, it's part of their professional responsibilities, and they want to break the contract, and obviously we'll leave that to the city attorney's office to handle.
Can I just jump in, Lauren, and just say that, based on my long relationship with these actuaries, if their board came back and told them to do this, I'm highly confident that they would do it, and we would pay for it through the other projects provision of the contract, or perhaps we would revise the contract, but it would be a non-issue in every way. Milliman isn't opposed to doing this. I'm not opposed to doing it. I just don't know why we would pay for something that we don't need and serves no purpose.
Right. That's that cuts to the question: is this a funding evaluation? I suppose, and that's going to be for ABCD to make that call. I believe when I spoke with Matt Larrabee and forget, I'm always dealing with Lad Peppernell and his brother Scott Peppernell. I think it's Scott. In talking to them, they made it sound like, well, it really wouldn't be that much more work if they did have to do this. But there are a lot of inputs that they would require in order to do the work, which would involve, I think, a fair amount of discussion with the trustees as to certain assumptions that would have to go into their work. So I think what I understood from Matt and Scott, and they'll certainly correct me later after you've seen this video, that a lot of the work was just coming up with the assumptions. And once the assumptions were in play, they've got the data to be able to do the other work, the actual determination of contributions and the other stuff that ASOP 4 would require. So I didn't get the impression from Milliman that this was a large lift for them. But again, I guess we'll cross that bridge when and if we need to get there. Hopefully they'll hear back from the ABCD that, of course, this is not a funding evaluation. When you're talking about you have no assets. and you're not making contributions to the fund. So, you know, it would be sort of useless for Milliman to have to prepare these reports, given the nature of the fund, the FPDR. But we'll see. I mean, the disciplinary boards have their own view of the world. Kyle, Steve McClary, you have a question?
Yeah, a couple questions. Do we have a sense, or do you have a sense of the time frame for the ruling from the ABCD? And the second question would be either to you or perhaps Sam or Stacy, just because I'm not sure. Is that FPDR required by the charter to have the levy analysis done annually or semi-annually?
I'll let you tackle that one, Stacy or Sam.
Yeah, I think
second one.
no, yeah, the second one. No, the charter does not require us to do a levy adequacy analysis. We have just done that as a matter of what seemed reasonable financial stewardship. So a plausible, yes, yeah, we're not required by charter to do. And I'll let you answer the first one.
Yeah, in terms of timing, I don't know. I will ask the Milliman to see if they have any sense of timing. I know when I've asked opinions of somebody at the Oregon State Bar, they'll get to it when they get to it. But perhaps the actuaries are more responsive. But I'll see what I can find out for you. And I concur, there's no regulatory or charter required reason to do the levy adequacy study. It's simply, I think, good financial stewardship to know, does the city need to worry or reasonably worry at any time in the future, will the FPDR costs hit that levy cap? And Sam, you may know this. Did the fund ever even do a levy adequacy study before the charter was reformed back in the mid-90s?
Yes, that's part of they were looking at the chart and the numbers were climbing high, and it was worried that it was going to hit the cap sometime in the future. So that was one of the drivers for the 2007 charter change and creating FPDR3. Just didn't think the trend was upward and nothing was going to bring it down. So that's why they did. So I have a question for you, Lawrence. So we get this analysis completed, the funding. What do we do with it? We're not funded group with it. I mean, it just seems like it's going to be a report that's going to be plunked in front of us, and there's nothing for us to do or use this report for. Am I correct?
I can't imagine there's anything that the FPDR board could do with that. Now the city may, I suppose, look at that and say, gosh, since we have to have this funding analysis and now we have to have a funding policy, and basically the actuaries are saying, we've kind of made one for you and you're not following it. The answer is, well, it's because we don't have to. I mean, again, that's why I think that it would seem sort of, it's a useless report, and it would seem a shame if Milliman had to perform the analysis because of the ASOPs, but if Milliman had to do it because of the ASOPs, we're certainly not going to tell Milliman don't do it and, disregard your own professional standards. Milliman has to abide by its professional standards, so they may end up having to prepare reports and come up with certain assumptions that are at the end of the day meaningless.
I would suggest that I'm, in theory, with results of such a report and establishment of a funding policy, that council could entertain the idea of setting up a trust and pre-funding the plan like PERS is being pre-funded. That would require coming up with funds in addition that it doesn't have right now to pre-fund, or that it hasn't set aside. And that's certainly out of the purview of this board. I think the only thing that we could do there is if we wholeheartedly endorse that concept, that we could encourage city council to consider that. But that's a lot of ifs, and that's a lot of money that I don't see lying around. And so, but I think that is ultimately a potential use for it. But unless there's somebody prepared to lobby for that with the city, again, it feels like a report that would just be thanks for the report.
And part of, just keep in mind the funding, we are considered $3 billion underfunded. To pre-fund it, we got to come up with $3 billion. or if we continue the tax levy on the way it is right now. So that's the dollars that you're talking about. And when that's been proposed in front of city council, they back up totally away from this. They don't want to try to figure out where they're going to get $3 billion today to pre-fund the plan. They're satisfied with the way it's funded and way to go forward. So just to keep the context in place.
Yeah. So,
Right. Yeah, my recollection from dealing with other public defined benefit plans that aren't PERS is that they come up with a funding policy. If we have assets, they would say, well, here's your liabilities. We back out the assets. That leaves an unfunded liability of X. We're going to try to fund that over a period of years, come up with what's called an actuarially recommended contribution, or an ARC. There's no obligation for the public employer to follow the actuarial recommended contribution. But again, the actuaries would come up with a number and say, well, here's the recommendation if you want to fund this thing over X number of years. Useful if you are intending to fund the plan over X number of years, but utterly pointless if you're not.
Well, I can say from where I sit, as my position on the board, what is of critical importance to me is that modeling that shows the probability that we would ever hit that $2.80 cap on the levy. That's what's important. And clearly we're in good shape in that regard right now. I would just push back on one tiny thing. Sam alluded to this. You have, Lauren, having your page 6 of your report here, that even if Milliman concluded the future benefit payments would require contributions in excess of the levy limits, there's nothing that the city or FPDR can do about that. We went through that in 2005 and 2006. Should that be the case, there is something we can do about it. It would be another reform. And that's what happened. What Sam was talking about in 2006, that they saw the projection going above the line. And that was the steps that were taken.
Yeah, but obviously there are things that people could do. If that came into play, of course there are things that can be done. They don't have to, right? If it would just be, well, the city's got to pay it, the city's got to come up with the funding source. The alternatives would be the charter could be amended to come up with a different source of funding. I suppose the state could get involved, and Oregon legislature could step in and compel some change. Of course, something could happen, but if nothing did happen, the city would still be obligated to make those payments. It would just come from some other source, probably the general fund, but maybe something else, maybe an income tax. I don't know. We can't really predict.
Do we by chance know if any of the other funds in the state of Oregon, I believe there's 6 other funds, or there's 6 total funds, do they do this review at all? Or are they just so small that there's no?
I believe they're all funded to some greater or lesser extent. They're certainly better funded than us. I mean, we've got 0.
Well, that's right. Like those other, are you talking about the other plans, Trustee Culp, that have the ETOP test?
Correct, they're outside of PERS.
Yeah, they, none of them are funded like this from like a property tax levy. So it's funny, like, Lauren is using like kind of actuarial or accounting speak, like they're funded, but in like the normal parlance of like, a normal person on the street, like I always say this and it makes the accountants nuts, but our plan is funded by this. I look at Lauren, see, he's rolling his eyes at me right now. By a dedicated, legally segregated. I'm just, distinguishing those two things.
It has a source of money. Yes. It is a future revenue stream, right? It is not a funded revenue source that is anticipated to pay all their costs, right? There you go. Now, other systems have said, we don't want to do it that way. We're going to do it more the traditional way, which is we're going to save money into a funded trust, a separate legal entity, that we're going to put money in it, and that money is going to be invested, and it's going to grow so that between the investment return and the contributions that the employer is going to put into the fund, those 2 sources of money will be enough to pay the benefits in the future. That's what PERS does. That's more of a traditional, that's what every private employer, they have a defined benefit plan, is required to do by federal tax code, is to pre-fund the liabilities. You are more in the Social Security model, which is we get this money from taxes every year, and we're going to take the tax revenue and pay the benefits out. And if there's anything left over, we're going to put it in the proverbial lockbox, is what Al Gore used to call it. And we all know there is no lockbox. We lend that money out. But it's similar to Social Security, where it's a pay-as-you-go system. And it's unique.
Yeah, it is, as far as we know, Trustee Colt, the only plan in the country. I've never been able to find another one like this. Yeah, and so I just wanted to point out that, yeah, when we all talk about a funded plan, what we mean is what Lauren's talking about, which is a PERS type of plan.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that there's no money for the plan, like in the parlance of just a normal person talking about that. Yeah.
Right. I mean, the funding is really the revenue source, and other plans have a big pot of money as the revenue source. We don't have that. We have the ability to tap into property tax revenue. All right. Well, the bottom line is we're waiting for Milliman. I will find out what how long they think it might be before they get an answer. And certainly if they get an answer, we'll update the board. But whatever the answer is, if it means that Milliman needs to perform these extra functions due to their professional responsibilities under ASOP number 4, then Milliman's got to do what Milliman's got to do, and we'll respond accordingly.
Thank you. Any other follow-up questions from anyone about what Lauren's presented here? Okay, well, thank you very much. That was very helpful to do, and I appreciate that we've got a clear direction right now. The contract's in place. Regardless of whether we see value in this or not, there's an obligation to pursue whether or not it's subject to this ASAP 4, and we'll hear back or get an ETA from you when you find out.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You bet.
And it looks like the next information item is on the disability pension benefits review. And then there's a 2.5. So is someone else doing the original part of this? And then back to you, Lauren, are you doing the full thing?
No, I'm doing the pension
The preliminary
comparison.
Okay, perfect. Well, then we'll turn it back to you, Sam.
Okay. Let's try to share my screen if I can find the right screen to share.
Chair McLeod, while Sam's setting up, may I just raise a presentation point?
Absolutely.
And that is, in both the disability retirement and in this ASOP 4 discussion, there were a number of attachments to the memos. That was extremely helpful. So I appreciated having those, especially as a new trustee, to have the source documents attached as exhibits rather than having to go find them. So thank you.
Agreed. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, we'll dive here into a PERS and FPDR disability retirement comparison. So a few months ago, you all asked for more information on how FPD retirement benefits compare to PERS disability retirement benefits. So I'm going to compare a situation of where we have a police officer who's part of FPDR to a police officer who's part of PERS and see what they would get if they become totally disabled. Now, PERS tier 1, 2, and 3 all have different start and end dates. And we have some active duty members who could be part of tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3. So I selected tier 2 because 63% of our active members would have been under a PERS tier 2 if they'd been hired elsewhere. For tier 1, only 4% would have been in that. That's the old one that was retired long ago. And 31% are part of ops, would be part of OPSERV. And so I chose the one where the most members are here. And I think this is the one when you've heard retirees talk about it, they're comparing FPDR 2 to PERS tier 2. So we have, like I said before, a police officer who is covered by the city of Portland, the FPDR 2 plan, and a police officer works for another city that's PERS covered and they're eligible for PERS Tier 2. So I'm going to use this information I have up front. So the job position is police officer. Both were hired July 4th, 1975. The hire date was January. That was date of birth, July 4th, 1975, excuse me. Hire date was January 15, 2000. Disability date was December 2023, just a few weeks ago. And salary at the time of disability is $120,000. So just ideal, so that's just simple what we're doing here, comparing. I thought it would be with FPDR2, you have two components, or you have the disability benefit component on top, and then it's followed by a service retirement. For PERS Tier 2, if you're disabled, you get disability retirement from day one. You don't have that disability plan in front of it. And so for the definition of disability for FPDR, a person shall be eligible for service-connected disability when they're unable to perform the member's required duties due to an injury or illness arising out of their work. Pretty straightforward. If you can't be a police officer or firefighter, you would qualify for these benefits. Now, if you go over here to PERS, they have to be totally disabled, not partially, and unable to perform any work. So they don't hold the work that you're doing as a police officer as their guide for disability. They look at what your education, training, and experience is and what other jobs you could possibly be performing other than a police officer in this case. So there is a possibility they can say, hey, look, we've done analysis. You could be working someplace else, and deny you getting a disability benefit or disability retirement. So there's is a higher what do you want to call it, bar to cross to get your claim approved for that. But I'm going to make it simple for this one. We're going to assume that everybody is permanently disabled and unable to perform any work. So we're going to take out that partial disability, ability to work in any of the work. I'm just saying you're totally disabled for the sake of this. One of the things I'm trying to do is I go through this, I'm trying to make it a very straightforward, simple approach. You could ask, what happens in this scenario? What happens in this scenario? What happens if this goes on here? The more complexities we throw in, the more harder this analysis gets. So I just want to keep it as simple as possible for you. So like I said, for FPDR, you have this first plan. So our FPDR disability plan. They'll receive this part until they hit retirement age. And we'll go over that here in just a minute. So, whoops. Their date of disability is December 2023, which we indicated above as a date of disability. Their benefit there would be $90,000. So what we take into account is their $120,000 salary times 75% of their base pay when they're disabled. Right there. And it does include some premiums, but does not include overtime. So that's where you come up with the $90,000. So COLA, there is really no COLA for this plan. It's more of a benefit adjustment that occurs regularly. So we treat anybody who's on disability as if they are still on active duty. And for the purposes of salary increases, we look at what union agreement they belong to. So they get the COLAs, they get the step increases, they get the longevity increases, everything else, the premiums that are all laid out in the contract. So we did, because this is an actuarial assumption, that every year that's going to amount to about 2.5% of annual salary. I think this is low, but again, I'm using what the actuaries do, because recently we've had higher inflation. We've had some more liberal contracts out there that have given more benefit, but we're just going to use this number here just because the actuaries gave it to us. And we will look at the end to see, gee, if you change this number to 5 or 6 or 7%, what it would do to the benefit. And so the benefits are not taxable. And service credit, again, if you were fully disabled, you're not SGA, which you're not able to work, sustain any gainful employment, you will receive full service credit for every year that you're on disability with it. And the benefits in this case will end after 30 years, which is when they hit their retirement age on that. It's fairly straightforward. So do you have any questions on this? How we calculate this first part? Now, this is for the first 7 years of this person's disability that they'll be able to get this benefit. And I know I'm moving pretty fast, but interrupt me, please, if you have any questions. So we're going down here to the second part. We're going to compare the FPD service retirement to the PERS disability retirement. Now, the PERS disability retirement starts on December 2023. This is the person the date the person became disabled, the police officer. And the FPDR service retirement begins on January 15. That's when the regular disability benefits ended. So we're just going to stick to the green side, and then I'll jump over to the PERS side. So the final average salary at the time is, we take 7 years and adjust those 7 years for 3.25% annual salary increase. So this is what you would get after 7 years of those salary increases. So that's what it would be at the time. We'd be estimating how much disability benefits you would have been getting at the time you retired. Again, they're reached disability retirement age of 30 years. And we're going to assume that there was no partial disability or anything, so they received the full benefit. We have a 2.8% multiplier. That's the one that gives you the highest benefit, the lowest survivor benefit. And this line here is just a recap. Back at December 2023 dated disability, the member is getting $90,000. But on the date they retire, they're going to get a benefit of $126,000. That's that $150,000 of final average salary up here, times the 30% years of service, times the 2.8% multiplier. Basically, that comes up to about 84% of their salary is what their benefit is. Now we'll swing on over here to the blue. Now, again, for the blue, at this point, we're only talking on December 2023. I haven't brought it up to the date that we are with FPDR yet. So their final average salary at this point would be the $120,000. But what they do is PERS averages over 3 years. So they'll look back 3 years and that's your average. So you probably won't be getting 120,000 as your base. You'll be a little bit less. FPDR has a 3-year look back, but we choose the 1 year that gives you the highest benefit. So we're assuming for this model, 120,000. So here they get a little less than 120,000, but they do have overtime included. Overtime is an average overtime, and I said Portland Police, that really should say for this employer, this person's employer. They look at all the overtime that all the police officers for that city work and average it. That's how much overtime you get. So if you have a police officer who's out there earning 75 or 80% higher than their salary because of a tremendous amount of overtime, they won't see that. They won't get that full benefit. They will get, and if we use the Portland Police most recent study on Portland Police, it's 15% load. Now, you talked earlier about overtime. Are you going to try, the city going to try to lower it? You could see that number lower in the future, but we just use 15%. So you take the final average salary, you know, the average of the 120% added 15% load. So as on the date of disability, their benefits 133,000. Or actually their final average salary is 133,000, excuse me. Their years of service is 30 because what they do for PERS is they say, how many years would you have of service would you accrue if you weren't disabled and worked till age 55? In this example, it's 30 years, plus or minus a few months. Their highest multiplier is only 2% here versus our 2.8. So you come out here to the benefit of what we calculate for on December 2023. So that's at the time of date of disability. You get the final average service of 133,000, which you calculate up here times the 30 times the 2%, and it gives you the benefit of 80,000. The key here is the 2 times 30 gives you a 60% increase versus FPDR. You know, it's getting 75% at this time, and their final salary, they're getting 84%. Now let's take it down here. We're going to true this up here. So we're going to look at both plans on January 15, 2023, the same day as the FPDR service retirement begins. So that's the benefit they're going to get there. Here it's 89,000. because your salary is fixed on the date of disability. You do not get any salary adjustments forward, and you get the 1.55% COLA increase. And we'll go over a little bit more on the calculation of that later. So that's why that benefit is there. We still included the 15% load. So any questions on that at this point? Throwing a lot of stuff out at you. Okay.
Sam, you said this is assuming 7 years of disability. Is that right?
Yeah, but I'm going to go all the way back here to the top because the higher date was the date of disability was 2023. Higher date, 2023 was the date of disability. So I took it out 30 years beyond that. Okay. To 2030, because that's when the FPDR benefit would be coming on. So the first, and I'll show you on the next slide that I've got a little bit more of how that works. So why don't you hold that question a little bit, and I think I can help answer that in the next slide.
Okay.
Sam, just wanting to clarify for the PERS illustration, you're illustrating the COLA adjusted benefit on January 2030. But is it true that that's adjusted every year?
Yes, that is adjusted. And okay. Stacy, when she gave me the number, she gave me the spreadsheet that has it adjusted and recalculated every year. Because let's look down here at the next line for the COLA. So we'll go a little bit more on that. So COLA for FPDR, this is only after the service pension starts. Before, remember, we're using 3.5%, which may be low. So we're going to assume the board gives the 2%. That's the max they can get. We're going to assume they get that. PERS has this complicated formula. It says 2% of service credit earned up to October 1, 2013, they get 2%, because that's when they changed the COLA calculation. Then they're saying after the service time after October 1 of 2013, you only get 1.25% COLA. However, if your benefit's above 60,000, the component that's above 60,000 only gets 0.15%. So that, Stacy went through. And so what we're looking here is it goes from about 1.54 to 1.56, maybe a little bit higher or lower over time. It changes every year, but that's what this, on average, we're looking at 1.55%. Benefits are taxable. The service component's taxable. The disability component in the first 7 years was not. The benefits are not taxable under PERS. PERS has an IAP, which is a defined contribution benefit, which people have been contributing to during their employment. Trying to predict what that is all depends on the investment options people have selected, how they want to cash it out there. So I didn't make any attempt to determine what a person would have. Now, what I want to show you here is, so I went year by year from 2023, the date of disability, up through 2031 is when the FPDR pension kicks in, and just for some run out to 2040. So you take a look at this first component up here. This is the salary. It's increasing by 3.5% a year due to union contracts. And again, you may argue that that number is too low. And that's, I think, a good argument, but I'm sticking with it. It's my story. I'm sticking with it for right now, the 3.25. Then when you come out to PERS, PERS starts here and only gets 1.55 approximately. Again, Stacy created me the whole spreadsheet that calculated these exactly, but for a rule of thumb, about 1.55. So when you first start out, the FPDR benefit equals 75% of salary. PERS only equals 60% of salary. You do have a overtime load in PERS, which you do not have in FPDR. The annual benefit increase for the first 7 years is 3.25, and PERS is approximately 1.55. You can already see that you're starting out higher and running higher for FPDR in the first 7 years. Now, when the FPDR service retirement begins, service retirement is 84% of final salary, PERS is 60. This was done intentionally to make that big difference because FPDR members do not have Social Security. So this is one way they're trying to amp up the benefits over PERS because you don't have Social Security. And then FPDR annual increase is 2% versus 1.55. So you run it out here to 2040. This is the difference in the benefits. Now, I will make an editorial comment here. You're talking about a tax-free benefit. Even at 150, if you have a 25% tax bracket, you're getting more money take home than you were out of PERS.
Sam, you got multiple hands up out there.
Okay. Christopher, why don't we start with you?
So using this example with the 7 years,
Yep.
if you're disabled longer than 7 years, is your benefit going to be reduced from 75% to a lower percentage?
No.
Assumption
I'm assuming here in this that the person is fully, completely disabled. We don't have SGA, so we do not see a reduction in the disability benefit. It stays 75% until they hit retirement age. That's why I wanted to keep this simple.
Yep.
Because if a person was SGA, if we determined that they could work, PERS would stop the benefit.
Right.
Because they aren't disabled from all occupations. There is some work they can perform. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to say with somebody's permanently disabled. So they get your 75% calculation through here, plus you get the 3.25% or whatever annual increase the labor agreements say you should be getting.
Who makes that evaluation on the permanent disability? Is that just internal?
That's the PERS board has a committee that does that.
Who does it for FPDR?
We do it here. We make the disability decision as part of our claim process.
Okay, good.
PERS, because PERS isn't workers' comp, they have their own disability team, let's put it that way, that makes that evaluation. I do not know the full criteria, how they define any work, but I imagine it's some education, training, and experience there. It is a higher bar to go, and sometimes you might be surprised what they say you can do when you don't think you can. But that's up to PERS. It's a higher bar.
Okay. Thank you.
So this is what we went through, and it was interesting here because I may take a little bit of steam from Lauren on his next presentation. Maybe I'll just put a teaser out there and Lauren can thought. Benefits are taxable. That's changing. The feds are changing that requirement too. They are only partially taxable in the future. So I'll let Lauren in his next talk do this. So just come back up to this, ran this through pretty fast. I think you've got all the numbers here with it. I don't know if you have any questions. It just shows here that FPDR was always intended to pay more for disability than PERS because you don't have Social Security. And that's why even when you come down here to this 2.8 and 2%, that applies whether you're disabled or not. That's partly there to help compensate for the lack of Social Security.
You have some more. You have some more hands.
Oh, Catherine?
Yes, thank you. This is great. This is really helpful because for those of us that aren't overly familiar with PERS, and this is really nice to have this side by side. So thank you. I'm wondering if it might be helpful just for the future to have samples at a couple of other different service/ages of disability just to see how the results might distort more or less favorably for kind of a couple of different combinations of age and service at disability.
Well, we could do that and take, when PERS Tier 2 start with that. I can try to do some stuff. The challenge is that you have to be disabled or have to be employed within the window of PERS Tier 2. And that's a fairly narrow window.
That makes sense. So in fact, then maybe my question is a little bit moot because the incidence of something being radically different from this is maybe not very likely because at this point, most of the Tier 2, FPDR Tier 2 people who are also PERS 2, it's a pretty small group older.
It's a narrow window, and unfortunately, I don't have the dates for you right now handy for when they're effective. The interesting thing is I did a comparison with OPSERB. OPSERB just really quickly does not have a disability retirement benefit. It has a disability benefit just like FPDR does. We pay 75%, they pay 55%. You come down here, it's calculations. We blow OPSERB so far out of the water, it's ridiculous. just because of how they've done it. So FPDR2 is close. FPDR1, just a small number of people, plus FPDR1 is a pain in the rear end because it's got so many different options, so many different bells and whistles in it that I think PERS has a hard time figuring it out at times too. So I didn't think that was worth it. I mean, we can take a look and I can play with different scenarios with it, but I think you're going to run into somewhat the same conclusion, simply because when we come to this third page here, you're going to see this same effect. Maybe that, you know, I have more years or different years in here, so you may be more amplified or less amplified, but you're always going to have FPDR is going to have more salary than PERS in both plans. It's going to have a higher annual adjustment than PERS does in both plans. That's always going to put FPDR on top somehow.
Okay. There were other questions, correct?
Stacy, you got your own question?
Oh, well, I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say that the dates for PERS Tier 2 are January 1st, 1996 through August 28th, 2003, Chair McLeod. And also just to say that if it helps, you know, in general, the further away from moving to that, you know, the further away someone is, the earlier in their career someone is disabled, the worse this looks. You know, you can see that because of the way the benefit builds, the worse the comparison looks in terms of the PERS benefit being worse than the FPDR benefit.
Okay. That is what
they,
so you're saying that if they happen to be younger or shorter service, the discrepancy between PERS and FPDR
grows.
It grows. Okay.
It grows because the FPDR benefit is growing so much more every year because it grows based on real wage increases, whereas the PERS benefit is only growing based on that PERS COLA, which you know declines every single year. And for this example person is 1.55%. You know, for somebody who was hired later, it would be even less, and so on. Yes.
Thank you.
Franco, you had your hand up at one point.
Yeah, I was just puzzling over where the workers, like the workers' comp benefit under the state statute would fall into all of this.
The reason I did compare workers' comp, because workers' comp is, Kim and I talked about it, it's so different on how they do things. And they're permanent, partial, permanent, total, when they pay, how they pay it, do they pay it out in a lump sum, do they continue a lifetime benefit? It's very hard to do. It's so fact driven by workers' compensation law and the decision of who the workers' compensation administrator is. Most of these benefits are offset, so you don't double dip for workers' comp and PERS. There's an offset. You may get a little bit more money. I don't know what it would be, because again, if you're significantly disabled, PERS can do a total settlement and pay you off 3 or 4 years into disability and give you a lump sum and say, here you go. And they close the claim out. It just all depends on how workers' comp wants to administer and what the facts are for workers' comp.
Yeah, I only brought it up because the disability benefit, the 75% untaxable FPDR disability benefit that replaces the workers' comp benefit doesn't have a cap on it for salary, whereas my recollection is the workers' comp benefit has like an average weekly wage cap, and then it's calculated at 66 2/3 of that. Yep. But if that's not part of your analysis here, then
workers' comp is so hard in the thing, you know, because Kim and I spent some time talking about it. It's so claim specific. Mm-hmm. That it's hard to do. Plus, there's a formula for the offset. You don't get full workers' comp or full PERS at the same time. It's with it. I mean, it is a good point. You could be getting some workers' comp, but how much for how long? That's really hard to tell.
Okay, thanks.
Sam, just a couple more questions about this.
Okay.
Although one of them just fell out of my head, so just wait a second while I remember. Oh. You stated that the PERS to disability benefit is only paid in the event of total permanent disability, right?
Correct.
And if that is not the case, what
do they get?
Nothing.
If you can, if they can identify here, you know, this, I'm going through the word term, any work. If they can document that you can do any work elsewhere, they won't pay this benefit. And you're going to have to wait until you hit normal service retirement to get a PERS service retirement.
Okay, so there's no salary continuation, or do they have a disability income plan or anything?
No.
Okay, so nothing.
Not
Okay.
here.
All right.
FPDR doesn't have that idea.
FPDR doesn't what, Christopher? Couldn't hear you.
So once you're determined to be fully disabled for FPDR, there's no rule that triggers you to have to find some other sort of work, or your benefit is lowered.
Well, what we have is that's what the SGA analysis is.
Okay.
Down here, I put it when we look at service credit. For this example, I assume they're totally disabled, so we didn't get into that. But if you are in, and Kim, feel free to chime in and correct me. If you are on claim for a certain period of time, maybe 1 year or 2 years, or you're considered medically stationary, we then do our own evaluation. Can you do, are you able to work someplace else for some money? If so, you will still get the FPDR benefit, but it could be reduced down to 50%, from 75 to 50%. And as long as you can't work as a police officer or firefighter, you will get this benefit until you hit retirement age.
Right.
It's just the amount of benefit you will get. And then if you are also, you're down to 50% and actually working, we will offset some of your salary down to the point the minimum benefit you will ever get from FPDR is 25%.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when those benefits are reduced, you do not accrue years of service at a full rate, correct?
Correct. That's
accrue-
why I put that little caveat in here when we did it. So yes, you accrue it at a slower rate.
Thank you.
Kim, did I hit that all right?
You did. Thank you,
Okay.
Sam.
Thank you.
Thanks again. That was extremely helpful.
Yeah. And again, this is a very simple thing. Like Christopher's talking about, if somebody can partially work. There's a lot of different variables. I wanted to keep it simple so you can just run down and see how the numbers are calculated in the general comparison with it.
Okay, if there are no further questions with this, should we move on to something that promises to provide some intriguing new stuff, including tax changes from Lauren and item 2.5?
If you haven't put to sleep yet, hold your horses. So this is a recurring question that's come up. There's two retired members. Is it Joe Jimkowski? Franco, remind me.
Joe Jimkowski.
Yeah, thank you. And Dell Stevens. They've sort of become fixtures. Well, Dell until his recent death. But between the two of them, they've both somewhat been fixtures around the halls of FPDR, championing the cause of trying to get the FPDR disability benefits tax, to get those FPDR2 disability benefits to have the same tax attributes as what PERS gets if you were getting service-connected disability. And as Sam just discussed, if you retire under PERS with a service-connected disability, you get that service-connected disability for the rest of your life. And because it's a service-connected disability benefit, it's tax exempt. FPDR does it FPDR2 does it slightly differently in that it's service-connected up to a certain point, but once you hit a certain age, the service-connected disability benefit converts to your normal retirement benefit. And retirement benefits, unlike service-connected disability benefits, are taxable. So over the years, there's been significant discussion over what the FPDR disability rules are and why they are how they are. So we wanted to address, between Franco and I, we wanted to address really three things. One, why does FPDR tax service-connected disability benefits the way it does? Is the fact that FPDR treats it as taxable once the disabled retiree hits retirement age or disability retirement age, does that run afoul of the state's ETOD rules? And number three, did the board of FPDR eliminate a disability retirement benefit when it modified some administrative rules back in 2015? So just to take the first one first, the tax treatment of FPDR2 benefits is completely driven by the tax code. When the fund is paying a service-connected benefit that's based as a percentage of compensation to a disabled firefighter or police officer, that payment is exempt from tax under Code Section 4081. Now, so long as it's paid under that formula, it continues to be tax exempt. However, under FPDR2, at a certain point, once the employee hits disability retirement age, the way in which the benefit is calculated changes. We stop paying the service-connected disability benefit, which is based on as a percentage of pay, and instead pay the regular pension benefit, which is a function of service and pay and age. So what happens is, and I think Sam's chart did a good job of explaining it, that when you hit the disability retirement age, the benefit may well go up. But now, instead of the benefit being completely exempt from tax, the benefit is completely subject to tax. And so net of taxes, the benefit may actually be less valuable as a retirement benefit than the non-taxable benefit the member was receiving while disabled. And that has been sort of a thorn in the side or under the blanket of some of the retired members of FPDR2. But again, the problem has been that's the way Congress wrote the tax code, and that the FPDR2 benefit has been designed that way since day one, and we don't have any control over how IRS taxes things. The only way to get a different tax result would be to change the charter. Now, ironically enough, given Mr. Stevens' recent passing, Congress did slip in a little noticed provision into the Secure 2.0 Act, which was passed at the end of 22, adding new Code Section 139 Cap C. Code Section 139 Cap C addresses this perceived tax hit to retired police and firefighters under service-connected disabilities that basically says, look, if you were getting a service-connected disability benefit and that benefit was tax-free and it converts to a retirement benefit, we're going to continue to allow you to take the portion that you were receiving tax-free and continue to receive it tax-free, but any increased benefit would be subject to tax. So if the service-connected disability benefit was $1,000 a month and it was being received tax-free, and it converts to retirement of $1,500 a month, the first $1,000 of that benefit would still be tax-free, and only the excess of $500 a month that you now have for receiving in excess of your disability benefit at retirement would be subject to tax. So it's perhaps Congress was listening to Del Stevens and his similarly situated colleagues who thought this wasn't fair, and eventually got something through Congress to fix this thing, albeit not until 2027. So in terms of the taxation of this benefit, we're stuck with what the tax code says is the required result, given how the service-connected disability benefit is calculated. But starting in 2027, there's going to be some relief for disabled firefighters and police officers who hit, in our case, disability retirement age. Trustee Colt?
Do we historically, or currently, do we have anybody in this category that's permanently disabled, that's collecting benefits?
I'm sure we do. I mean, there's Joe Jimkowski is.
That's on the fire side, I'm guessing.
Yeah, on the fire side.
I can't think of any on the police side unless they just slip my.
Yeah, Trustee Colt, I'm sorry.
I don't want any names, but just in general, how many people does this affect in the fund?
I would defer to Stacy, but I know that we have had members transition from disability to retirement on the police side as well. But I don't have numbers.
Okay. Fully disabled. Or just,
I know we have one on long-term disability police who's not SGA right now. Kim, pretty sure.
I'm thinking historically, Stacy. So I
historically.
don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so Trustee Colt, they do exist. But again, it's, it's not, certainly this is not something that is widely applicable to a big swath of the membership. But then, as those folks retire, given that there's, say, 30 people on long-term disability at any one moment, and then they retire, and then they're impacted by the taxability of this benefit. So, you have however many decades worth of folks who are on that. But yeah, so it's not like a, big pervasive thing, but there are definitely people.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, it's a significant tax hit for a small number of people, is how I understand it.
Well, this is a very fortuitous development in the tax code, it seems. And
right.
Is it something that would apply automatically to members in this plan? Okay.
Yeah. Basically, right. Once the law takes effect, when the payments are made, FPDR will treat the first, whatever the amount in service-connected disability they've been receiving. That amount will be basically exempt from tax. They won't have any tax withholding on it. When they get the 1099-R at the end of the year, the complete distribution will be shown, but the taxable amount will be considerably less than what it would be in 2026 before the new law took effect.
That is really good news. I know it's still 3 years away. But
it's good news for those on service-connected disability. I do wish that Del Stevens had lived to learn about this, because it sort of, again, kind of gives him a somewhat Pyrrhic victory at this point. But something that he'd been pushing for is something that Congress took to heart and has given relief, albeit not until 27.
Yes, thank you. And so, Stacy, Sam, Kim, I'm assuming that staff will take the appropriate measures to begin looking into who this might affect and appropriate communication measures about this.
Yep, and then we'll have to program our tax software, which we already have for other special tax situations, like surviving spouses of folks killed in the line of duty and other various little intricacies of the tax code, and then communicate with folks. And so it will be very good news to a handful of people. And thank you, Lauren, for bringing it to our attention.
I'll confess that in my review of the Secure 2.0 effort, this did not hit my radar until I started researching this issue. So I'm sure I would have come to my attention eventually, but it's good for me to learn something while I'm researching something. Instead of
I'm sure it would have bubbled up to mine as well, and I've taken several classes on the Secure Act, and not until you pointed this out did I say, oh, bingo. Anyway, so luckily they gave us several years for implementation. But
Okay.
Should we let you carry on?
Yeah, so moving into number 2, which is equal to or better than issue. There have been, and Franco can probably talk about this more than I can, because there actually was litigation. But basically, PERS does not factor in the tax character of the benefit when determining whether the benefit is equal to or better than, and it's baked right into their administrative rules. Franco, do you want to chime in on that?
only to point out, there was Mr. Jimkowski did have a hearing. So in addition to all the disability hearings we were talking about earlier, I'm reminded now the administrative rules also contain appeal rights for retirement benefits decisions and death benefits decisions, and those kind of cases do come up from time to time. We did have a death benefits case within the last year or so. The retirement benefits cases are rare, but this was one of them. And so an administrative law judge at the Office of Administrative Hearings heard a bunch of arguments about why, in essence, the benefit received when a member reaches 30 years of service and is on disability becomes a retirement benefit and becomes taxable. I mean, there's not a lot of there was not a lot of merit to the claim. So I mean, there isn't a whole lot to be gleaned from that case other than the conclusion was that and I guess Congress has sort of in some sense I mean, they didn't ratify it specific to Portland, but if there was some natural right to this tax-free service retirement benefit, then Congress obviously wouldn't have had to do what it did. But in terms of the FPDR plan, the administrative law judge found no requirement that there be a tax-free, quote unquote, service retirement benefit. And to the extent that there were allegations in that case, one of my colleagues tried that case. I don't recall whether the allegation that the board changed something about the benefit structure of the plan was litigated, but and I don't want to steal your thunder, Lauren, but
no, not at all.
I mean, in the memo, it explains that what actually there was apparently a misperception about the board's revision of an administrative rule concerning services benefits that there was some kind of lingo or shop talk that was used describing the scenario that it is a little cumbersome to describe, as you've just experienced, where you move from the disability benefit to the retirement benefit. And the shorthand for that was disability retirement benefit. And that was codified in the administrative rules. And when the Bureau saw fit to remove that reference in the rules, that seems to be what the basis for the allegation that the board took a benefit away, which obviously the board can't do.
It was kind of intertwined with the ETOB. There was, sort of like, making a bunch of arguments to see what would stick.
Yeah, and then I guess the only other thing I'd say is then the case was brought separately at the circuit court, suing the city council members, FPDR board, PERS board, same plaintiff, unrepresented by this point, and the court basically found, well, if you wanted to argue this issue again, you had an appeal right from the Office of Administrative Hearings final order, which would have gone straight to that writ of review procedure I was describing earlier at the circuit court if the plaintiff had wanted to appeal, and that didn't happen. So the court essentially found that the administrative remedies available had not been exhausted, and therefore it wasn't appropriate to just bring a separate lawsuit over the same issue.
Right. So, I mean, basically, it was all kind of conflated into ETOB and the administrative rules. Administrative rule cleanup that included the term disability retirement, which really didn't exist as a concept. It was just a shorthand reference to the conversion of the benefit from the disabled to where it would be calculated under the plan's retirement rules. So again, in the cleanup of that particular administrative rule for the FPDR, there was I think, a misunderstanding that that the board had somehow eliminated a benefit that would have provided this tax exempt payment. But that really wasn't true. But it had been raised a number of times in public comments, in particular from Mr. Stevens. So we thought this was a good opportunity, since we were addressing this in a holistic manner, to try to put that misunderstanding to bed. And again, as the board composition has changed over the years, Mr. Stevens would make his appearances and make public comments asserting certain things, like the fact that the board had eliminated the disability retirement benefit back in 2015. And, as new people cycled onto the board, they have no reason to disbelieve him, and he's saying this stuff. But then we had to always sort of inform and disabuse the new board members of what he's actually talking about. So again, the intent of this memo was to hopefully provide a comprehensive review of the whole disability retirement issue. And again, ultimately in 2027, it becomes a moot point. Any other questions about the rise and fall of the disability retirement issue?
No, that was very helpful. This has been stewing about for some time, and
it has.
And it's, I know I share your disappointment that Mr. Stevens wasn't even if he didn't benefit personally, wasn't aware to see this pass so that he could feel vindicated to some extent. So
yeah, I mean, he's right. It was, in many ways unfair. Disabled firefighters and police officers who were disabled in the line of duty, and why that the fact that the tax nature of the benefit was taken away simply because they hit a certain age.
Right.
That there was a certain fairness issue there, but it really was for a higher pay grade than FPDR. So in this case, Congress took the baton and dealt with it.
That's terrific. Well, thank you very much. Anything further on this topic? Okay, next up is the overview of FPDR administrative rules. I guess, Sam, I should maybe check in with you to see, should we continue on with our agenda? It's been a long meeting. We're coming up on 3 hours. I think Trustee McClowry had to sign off about 30 minutes ago. And I don't know that he got to hear this good news from Lauren. So, and I can continue on or not, but I just wanted to check to see what we should do timing-wise.
Well, let me go through here administrative rules. You have in your packet the process of administrative rules, what we go through with it. I'll leave this up just to you to read, and if you have any questions, email me or call me. I'll walk you through some more of what we do, because we are next meeting going to talk about, present to you some administrative rules for your approval. And see what we're going to do here. Let me give you a timeline of what we're going to do, and I'll do a quick go. So we're going to publicly post the rules on February 15th. We have to post them at least 30 days ahead of the time that you all will review or vote on them or deliberate on them. We will have a public Q&A session. Just real quickly, it's a Q&A session. That's all it is. It's not a work session. It's not a bargaining session with the unions. It's not a decision-making. People can tell us what they think, like, or don't like about the proposed rule changes. We do listen to what people say and have had made changes in the past or even pulled some rules based on their comment. Key thing is this public Q&A session is not a substitute for a person submitting written or presenting oral testimony to the board. I always tell people that attend that. And then you all will evaluate the administrative rules on March 19th, our March meeting. So we have 3 types of rules that we're going to be presenting to you, and you'll see them when we post them. One is to update the definition of attending physician to include nurse practitioners, naturopath, physicians, and assistants to match what workers' compensation is doing. make it real simple. There's a lot of confusion between medical providers. Gee, is this workers' comp or FPDR? Anyway, so and this is a benefit to our members. Well, you'll see more detail on that when the rules are presented. The next one is the cleanup for the definition of spouse. We talked about that a couple meetings ago. This time what we're going to do is all the rules have multiple old definitions of, we have 4 or 5 definitions of spouse and surviving spouse in the administrative rules. We need to get them cleaned up so they're the one correct definition across the rules. And lastly is a real minor one, is that when new citizen trustees come in and the rules say they have to be sworn in by the auditor's office, well, the city council removed that requirement. So board members no longer have to be sworn in by the auditor's office. So we just need to delete that one sentence. So that's what we're doing with that. With us, so real quick, if you have any questions about the administrative rules, we can talk about before we do them or anytime between now and then, so you understand what they're doing. Legislative update, you've got a criteria of what I look at all the time. The first one that I look at is we look at the funding of FPDR. I always look at property taxes. The state constitution has a provision put in by a former firefighter and former trustee actually into the Oregon Constitution that protects FPDR's fund that we can have as our own tax levy. I'm very concerned if people go into property tax, they are going to delete that sentence because they hate it. We are the only city and municipality in states gets this special treatment. So you talk about worst case scenarios and funding. This is the ultimate worst case scenario. There's no indication that for now or the next several years they're going to look at property tax, but I always look at it. And then there's the other issues that we have. The bills have not been released for the upcoming session, which starts February 5th and lasts through March 10th. Most of it's going to be housing, homelessness, Measure 110, public safety, those type of things. I've heard nothing about any workers' compensation or PERS bills going through, but I will look because somebody's bound to try to sneak something into the whole list. So you'll hear more about that when we come through. And then I'm going to jump past everything and let you close out if you want to, Stacy, on the expenditures. FPDR updates. We talked out earlier about the CPPW union starting the negotiations tomorrow. The reason why that's a concern to us is half our staff is under that union and they've not been unionized before. So this will change how we manage those employees and how we do it. So we're waiting for that to get done. And then we'll have in a future board meeting minute, we will talk about what impact that has. Then lastly, future meeting agendas. You've got the list there. If you want anything included, let me know. The March meeting will be held in room 2500 in the 1900 building. Julie will give you the instructions and stuff again on how to go there. We'll be meeting there through September and possibly into November of this year. So that's everything I've got on my list. And then, so Stacy, if you want to, you opened up so you can close out with the summary of expenditures.
The only thing I really want to say is that, because I teased it earlier, was that Trustee Kramer, you asked me a question about personnel spending at the last meeting. And in the process of following up with that, I just want to thank our newest trustee for eagle eyes because, yeah, we were running ahead of where we should have been. And hadn't really noticed because we're not paying that much attention at this point in the year. And also the personnel budget's very predictable. And it's because of the way our health benefits were being charged. So we have some questions into the benefits office right now about that. And I won't bore you with the details, but it's about moving to a blended rate model for charges and how that happened. And we can't tell if we misunderstood or they messed up at this point. But anyway, we are looking into it. So thank you, Trustee Kramer. Pretty impressive showing for new trustees. So thank you for that. And that's all I would have to say, unless folks have other questions.
I don't, and I'm not hearing anybody anymore from anyone else. So thank you both. And thank you, Sam, for giving a quick run through of what we can expect on the administrative rules in the next meeting. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, well, with that, that's been a long meeting, but I felt like we got some very good things covered. The budget was very thorough, and that those particular items on the ASAP 4 and the disability benefits comparison and the analysis about those changes. Those are things that have been kind of clicking around in the back of my mind that just wouldn't rest for a while. So I'm really I'm glad that we got a chance to hear about those things. If there's nothing else, last chance for anyone to speak up on any miscellaneous items.
Tom just threw a chat line there, checking back with Majora's contract. Sure, we'll do that. We're still working through the details with them, but we'll definitely come back to you when that's done.
Okay, thank you very much. So that potentially on March, if that's been wrapped up by then.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good question. With that then, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate your patience, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.